Imagine walking into your office and it's 3 a.m., but there's 100 people still there working. They never leave and they never stop. Then you realize they're all working for you for free while you sleep. That's literally what N8N does for your business. It gives you the invisible team that never takes breaks, never asks for a raise, and gets better with time. I use these same N8N superpowers to scale my Inc. 5000 companies to $800,000 per month while actually shrinking my team. And here's the twist. I can't code at all. And by the end of this video, you're gonna go from complete beginner to actually building your own automations and feeling like you finally hacked reality. Now here's some examples of what you're gonna learn how to build. AI support agents and appointment setters that actually talk to your CRM. Viral content engines that find top performing videos in your niche and then actually write viral scripts for you. Lead scraping bots that find and verify and reach out to thousands of prospects on autopilot. And Instagram systems that grow your account by sending viral comments and personalized DMs without you ever touching your phone. Well, if this looks complex, don't worry, because I'm gonna break down every step, and I'm even gonna show you how to copy the exact automations that I use in my business for free. You need to learn N8N right now while it's still early. Now, you ready to automate your way to freedom? Let's build some N8N magic over here.
If you're brand new to the world of automation, let's just start by talking about what N8N is, why it's so important, what it does. Now, I've been building automations for over a decade, and back in the day, Zapier was really the only game in town. And the problem Zapier solved was it allowed you to connect two applications together. For example, somebody books a meeting on Calendly. You want that person who booked the meeting to then go into your CRM, whether that's MailChimp or ActiveCampaign or go high level. Well, if you don't know how to code, I don't know how to code, then you need a seamless way to make those two platforms talk. And that's what Zapier and the rest of these no-code applications do. They take what should be complex code between two different softwares and turn it into a nice user interface. And now non-technical people can talk to their software applications and get them to do basically anything that you want. Well, over the 10 years, that's evolved quite a bit. There was Zapier and then Make.com and now N8N. And there's a lot of other platforms out there. Those are the big three. Now, right now we're focusing on N8N because frankly, it's the most powerful, it's the most exciting, and it's free. But it is important to know that the purpose and use case, and that's no-code automation. People who can't code being able to talk to software and essentially build applications. Now, once we get inside of the platform and start building, you'll get a much better idea of what's possible. But really, it's limited to your imagination. I build things now that I'm going to show you that would take software teams months and lots of iterations to develop and build. And now I can build it with zero technical skills. Any use case that I need to grow my business, I can now implement for myself for free. So why should you care? Well, this is an AI sales director that I built, and it's a good idea of how N8N works. If you know anything about sales and running sales teams, the worst thing that a sales director needs to do on a day-to-day basis is listen to all the sales calls that the closers do and hopefully go over it with them, give them some feedback. But what if you built an AI sales director that just read the transcripts, ran through a prompt, created a report card, and then actually tracked how that salesperson did in a way that you could report on? Well, here's an AI sales director that I built that does exactly that. It watches for transcripts. The AI sales director listens to all of the transcripts. Then this AI sales director agent actually goes through the entire transcript with our prompts and creates that report card and scores them on various different metrics. Now our sales director doesn't have to listen to all of the calls from our 6 closers every single day. Now they can focus on only the ones that didn't perform well because my AI sales director is going through them and finding those outliers. So instead of hiring more people to review those calls or just expect that this one person is going to listen to all the calls, now I've freed up my one sales director and given them essentially the superpowers of 10 to 20 sales directors while making their job more enjoyable and having better oversight on my sales team. And this is an also really good example of how N8N works, how no-code automation works. You have a trigger starting on the left-hand side. It's watching for some sort of event. And then from left to right, it's taking steps that I tell it to actually execute on this workflow. And there's a lot of flexibility here. I can get this agent to do just about anything that I want. So when I say what you can build is really limited by your imagination, it is. But the more that you see and the more that you're exposed to, the more use cases you've seen other people implement, the more ideas that you're gonna get, the more you're gonna start thinking out of the box and how you can really get the most out of this platform. And once you master this stuff, you can use it twofold. One, you can use it to scale the crap out of your company. And this is how you grow revenue while shrinking costs, increasing profits. because this lets you scale infinitely without hiring more staff. And then the second major use case for mastering this stuff is that you can sell all of these things. We often sell even this AI sales director and a lot of our content automations to our clients for massive profits. And if you're listening to this as an employee or as a freelancer, learning these skills is going to make you the highest paid employee and freelancer in the world over the next 5 to 10 years. I guarantee it. Okay, so why N8N? I talked about Zapier, I talked about Make. You may have even gotten a deal on AppSumo for some no-code automation platform that's free for life and claims to be the best. Well, I want you to tune out all that noise and just listen to this general advice. Now, this video is going to show you how to master N8N, but there's an important distinction to note between these different AI automation tools. Typically, the more flexible and powerful they are, the more of a learning curve there's going to be to actually get really good at. And N8N is the most powerful and the most flexible. That's why there's going to be a learning curve. So you just need to embrace it. You need to be okay getting stuck and getting unstuck. And the goal of this video is to walk you through step by step how to get better at this platform, master the basics, and help you learn how to get unstuck. Because no matter what I teach you in this video, the reality is you're going to get stuck. There's a lot of nuance. All of these nodes are different. All of the softwares that N8N communicates with are different and interpret data in a different way. So what I want you to get out of this, one, be able to build automations from scratch using your imagination, connect your existing tools. And the second big goal from this is to teach you as much as I can, but still prepare you to get stuck and then get unstuck, because that's where the real learning happens. So with that being said, the big difference between N8N and Zapier, and I'm just gonna break these two down briefly. I'm not gonna talk about Make, because frankly, I don't want any of you using Make at this point. It's either N8N or Zapier. And the reason for that is you really wanna reach for either the most complexity and structure and really mastering N8N, or you want to reach for something that's really user-friendly and integrates with the most applications natively, which is Zapier. So really quickly about Zapier, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. If you really want to learn the differences, then I have an entire video dedicated to it. It's going to be linked down below or somewhere on this video. But I spend, as you can see, $1,600 per year on Zapier. I've been using it for over a decade. And the reality is you might still need a Zapier account even if you master N8N. The main reason for that is Zapier still to this day has the most native integrations. And a native integration is a software that is essentially partnered with Zapier, where you can communicate back and forth with that software in a really easy way. For example, here's an automation built in Zapier that I still can't build in N8N. And it essentially unlocks courses inside of the school platform, SKOOL, which is where I have my communities, my AI automation insiders, which you should join. There is no open API that I can use to talk to that platform. The only integration they currently have is with Zapier. So if you're a beginner, Zapier is also the most user-friendly. Maybe you don't want to go all in on AI automation right now and learn how to build really complex stuff with N8N. Maybe you just want to connect some simple applications, get up and running really quickly. Zapier is going to be your by far most friendly option to getting up and running quickly and not dealing with the getting stuck and the nuance that you're going to encounter with N8N. But on the flip side of that, Zapier is also going to be the most expensive, and they don't really offer discounts, and there's no real way around it. However, because you're watching this video, you are interested in N8N. You want to go all in, you want to learn this stuff, you're cool with getting a little bit stuck. So let me just walk you through the different plans and pricing so you can pick the best option, and then I'll show you how to set up the free version that I use with absolutely no technical skills. So there's two versions of N8N, one where they host it, that's the cloud version. That way you don't have to worry about, keeping your own server up to date, updating N8N. They handle all that for you on the back end. And there's some advantages to the cloud version, such as they have AI helper bots that only work inside of the cloud version, and you get more support from their team. And it's actually very reasonably priced. It starts at $24 per month, but as you start racking up more automations and you're using more workflow executions and more tasks, this does start to snowball. So this is 10,000 workflow executions per month. If you're doing 50,000, now it's $144 per month. And if you're just looking at one of my N8N accounts, I've done about 7,000 in the last 7 days, and I plan to continue to build more and do even more automations and workflows. So this can get really expensive really quickly. So there's an alternative to the cloud version that's completely free, and that's the community version. That's what I use. That's what most people that I know use. And the reason that we use the community version is there is no limits. You can have as many workflows, as many executions as you want. You don't have to pay N8N monthly. Your only monthly expense is going to be server costs. So if I come into my N8N and I go into my settings, you'll see that I'm on the community version. I have unlimited active workflows and I have unlimited executions. Now, the more that you do inside of N8N, the more powerful of a server that you're going to want to have. But nowadays with the VPS, the virtual servers, it's really easy to scale up your server and scale down as needed. So my total all-in cost for running N8N on a monthly basis is really about $60 per month, which is unbelievable. And I'll be able to scale that to a lot of tasks and executions. Now, there are a couple downsides to using the community version. One is I can't invite admin users. There's a couple things that are a little bit more complex, like logging into Google, which I'll show you how to do. But in general, I think the upsides of the community version massively outweigh the downsides. Now, I could show you how to install it yourself, set up the server, but I really don't want this video to be about that. And I don't even think it's worth you learning, because realistically, you only have to do it once. And if you only have to do it once, then why do it yourself? So if you join my AI Automation Insiders, it's a free school community. You can just go in. There's a pinned post where my team will actually set up your self-hosted N8N. Now, a lot of people when they're just starting out will hear the differences and they'll sign up for the cloud version because it's really easy to get up and running quickly. And then eventually after a couple weeks of building, want to move over to the self-hosted version. And moving isn't that hard, but it is much easier just to start with the solution that you plan to end with. So with that being said, my advice to you is to start with the community version. So I'll have a link to the community down below with a link to this post. That way you can go ahead and my team will just set up your self-hosted N8N for you when you do it at cost. All right, now we've covered the boring stuff. Let's actually get inside of N8N and show you around the dashboard and the settings, and let's get you configured the right way. So you'll come in and it's really actually a simple interface. They don't have a lot going on, and I really like that because almost all of your time using N8N should be spent inside of these workflows. So this is the home screen. You'll see all of your workflows here, and you'll see a bunch of labels and tags. Now, I really want to talk to you first about nomenclature, because as you start building automations and workflows, it gets to be a lot. It gets to be overwhelming, and you want to be able to find them easily and filter them easily. So there's 3 layers of actually setting up that system. One is the name. What do you call it? You can search by the name of the automation here. You can go by folders. So as you can see, personal, EA agent, personal. These are the different folders that these are categorized in. And then here you can see tags, personal, inbox, EA. So when I'm searching, I can filter by names A to Z. I can search for the name, and I can also come into filter and search by tags. And I use tags to basically just tell me what that automation is about, or if it solves a specific problem, I'll put that in the tag. An example of that is this one, AI cold email reply writer. The problem I solved with this one is go high level custom fields. They don't make it really easy to update custom fields inside of N8N. But I was able to solve that problem in this automation by using this API workaround. So anytime I need to solve that problem again, I can just filter by GHL custom fields and see what I did the first time. Now, if you're wondering where these folders are, they're actually in this personal tab. So each user in N8N can have their own folders dedicated to them. Now, one of the downsides of the community version is you're going to be the only admin allowed inside of your application. So if you invite other users into your N8N account and they start building inside of their folder, they're actually not going to be able to edit or build your automations in your personal folders. But if it's just you, this is where you can organize the folders. So I can create an additional folder here. You can label it by use case, by company, however you want. But it does make a really clean way to organize your different workflows. For example, I have this executive assistant agent. And all of them, I've got EA on the titles on these as well. I've also got them tagged, and I've also got them in a folder, so it makes it really easy to find them. Now, the next thing I want to show you is credentials. I mentioned earlier that the purpose of no-code applications like N8N and Zapier is to talk between different applications. So you can build something unique and build a direct connection between different softwares that you use. And in order to initiate those communications, whether you're sending to or receiving from another tool, you need to have credentials to that tool. I just can't communicate with your CRM or your Google. That would be inappropriate. I would need your API key. So I actually never go into this tab. I'm typically signing up for the credentials from within the workflow. But here I can see what I'm signed into, all of the applications that I have, all of the logins that I'm logged into. And this makes using that application in the future much easier. So with my goal for you being to get up and running on N8N as soon as possible and just learning what you need to know to start building and implementing, I'm going to do you a favor. And I'm going to skip over a lot of stuff that I don't practically use and you likely won't practically use. And that's going to save you the space in your brain for what actually matters. So things like this executions tab, or this shared with you tab, I'm actually going to skip over because likely you're not going to use them. All right, so coming down in the dashboard on the bottom left, you'll see templates. If you click templates, that actually opens up N8N's community templates section where you can search for different stuff. I'll show you how to use that later in this video. Variables we don't use, insights we don't use, and then the support. If you need, a quick button to get to their community forum, their course, their documentation, that's what that's for. And then coming into my actual settings, there's a couple important things here. First, you need to enter an activation key. If you've just installed the community version, it actually wants you to validate your email. So you're going to put in your email, it's going to send you an activation key. You paste your activation key. That's it, you're good to go. I then recommend enabling two-factor authentication. I don't have it on this workspace, but this is really delicate stuff. If somebody gets in here, they can really cause a lot of damage, especially as you have more and more of your business relying on these automations. If someone got in here and started to wreak havoc on my business, it would be an absolute nightmare for me. So I definitely recommend setting up this authentication. In the Users tab, you can invite other members. Remember, those members can only build inside of their own personal folders, not inside of yours. Here you can create your own N8N API key. If you ever want to talk directly to your N8N account, you'll need an API key. You can create it here. The next thing that you'll use occasionally is community nodes. I'll show you how to use these effectively once we get into actions. But mostly for this, I really wanted to stress the importance of keeping your account safe. Use the two-factor authentication and make sure that your API keys are protected. All right, and now for the fun part, I'm gonna actually create a workflow and let's start building some stuff. I'm gonna hit the create workflow button in the top here. I could also go ahead and use that plus button in the top left. And this is where you're going to end up spending most of your time inside of N8N, is actually building inside of this canvas in this workboard. So there's a couple things that are going to make your life a lot easier as you're building. Believe me, you're going to thank me later as I do this. So the first thing that I always do when I start building a new workflow is I'm going to go ahead and open up a new browser. I'm going to come into ChatGPT, and then I'm going to open up this N8N Assistant GPT. I've used a lot of different AI assistants in helping me build and fix workflows. This one is my favorite. It's free to use. I'm going to link it down below as well. So if you want to just access this assistant, it's going to make building the automations a lot easier, especially as you're getting stuck. This helps me get unstuck more than my developer, who I actually have on call, who when I can't figure something out, I send him the videos. Before I do any of that, I'll use this first so that I can keep building and not have to wait for someone to come help me. Now, the other reason you're going to need this Copilot is because if you want to do anything custom, you want to change the format of something, you want to remove line breaks from something, you're going to need to learn how to format data correctly as data goes from left to right inside of your workflow. And whereas Zapier makes this really easy to do without knowing how to code, there's a formatting module, there's AI format, and you never even have to look at code, transform. It's just kind of intuitive as you click through to change data. Well, in N8N, you don't have that, and there's pros and cons to it. Well, inside of N8N, you don't have options like that. You actually need to code the change in the data. And these AI assistants are going to help you do that. And I'm going to show you exactly how to interact with these assistants, so literally you never have to code. All right, here we are inside of our first workflow. Now we're going to start actually clicking some things and seeing what this thing does. So the first step is always to add a trigger. So I'm going to click on that first step here. I'm going to hit that plus button, and it's going to open up a panel on the right-hand side, and it's going to give me some different trigger options. So now let's just run through some of these triggers. I'm going to hover on some of the most important ones, and I'm going to show you some really cool use cases that N8N does, that no other platform that I found does, that I actually use all the time. Remember, my goal is to give you the most practical and useful advice in the least amount of time. All right, so let's go through these triggers. The trigger is what essentially starts the workflow. What is going to initiate that automation to begin? And some options that we have: trigger manually. This is great for testing. We're going to talk about testing in depth soon. You'll almost never want trigger manually to be your actual production trigger, but I'll show you what that's good for. We do use this quite frequently in the testing phase. On app event, this is probably going to be one of your most common triggers. This is something happens in this application, you want that to trigger the workflow to start. Someone books a call in Calendly, you want to put them into your CRM. Someone subscribes on a forum, you want to put them into your CRM. Someone pays in Stripe, you want to put it into a Google Sheet. That trigger is what's happening in that other application. So if you click on App Event, you'll see all of the native integrations that N8N actually has. Now, if you come to N8N integrations, hopefully they have a native integration with your software. It makes building workflows a lot easier if it's already built in. So if you want to come to N8N, you can come into Product Integrations. You can see all of the different tools you have access to, or you can just come in as you're building and then just search for your thing. Hyros, it doesn't exist. Google Sheets, Awesome, it does exist. If there's a native integration, it means it's going to be much easier for you to build automations to communicate with that platform. Now, if there's no integration, that doesn't mean that you can't communicate. It just means it's going to be a little bit harder, and I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. Next trigger, on a schedule. Maybe you want it to run every hour, every day. There's a lot of good use cases for this too, and you can customize it however you want. Here's a good example of that trigger. I have this one set up to actually send our team holiday promotions. So I have this programmed so that a day before each major holiday, it actually triggers this automation, finds the holiday, creates a promotion and a promotional graphic for it, and then sends our team a message. Hey, this holiday is coming up. Here's an idea on a promotion you can run. Here's a graphic. Here's some email copy. And it does that on autopilot on the schedule. Another trigger is webhook call. A webhook is one way that one application communicates with another. It's essentially just a link with some data attached to it. And it's very frequently used, especially when you're communicating to and from apps that don't have good native integrations. On form submission, so one of the things I love about N8N is one of the most common triggers for any automation is going to be a form submission. Sales team gets done with a call, they do a post-call form. If someone wants to open a ticket with your support team, they do a support form. Well, in the past, you needed to build a form in Jotform or Google Forms and then connect that form via automation to this workflow and then receive that data. But if that connection breaks, you're in trouble. N8N's actually built the form right into the platform, so you don't need to go create the form separately. You can just do it here using N8N. A good example of this trigger is in this automation here. This one scrapes content ideas from Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. But I have to tell it what to scrape. And the way that I tell it what to scrape is by submitting a form. So this one's triggered on a new form submission. I'm going to go ahead and open up that form link that's linked right there. And this is a form built in N8N. I give it the URL, the number of videos, and the number of months. And once I submit this, it actually triggers this automation. I don't have to rely on a connection between Jotform and N8N. And even though the form builder itself isn't super powerful, in a lot of cases, you don't need it to be super powerful. So that's what this use case is really great for. I'm going to skip one and come to chat message. So this on chat message trigger is very cool because it essentially does the same thing as form submission, but it's just a different way to interact with that automation. You can use this to build chat bots. So if you want to communicate with that automation without having to fill out fields on a form and you just want to talk to it naturally and then get a natural response, the on-chat message is a really good way to do that. And here's a good example of that trigger being used here. This is a knowledge base that I built for my team. They can just chat with that knowledge base using the simple chat form, get an answer, talk back and forth to it, and you can do a lot of stuff to customize it. I actually styled this one, and I used AI to come up with the styling. I told it my fonts, I told it my colors, and then I plugged in this code that was generated by AI. So now I can share this link with my team, LGJ Big Brain. They can chat with it right here, and it triggers that automation based on the chat and then gives them a response. Now, the other two options you're not going to be using a lot, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. When executed by another workflow, this is one of the really advanced features of N8N. It's using workflows to trigger and interact with other workflows, and I will show you an example of that in use. And then run other ways. There's some other stuff that you can do in here. In general, you're not going to be using them unless you start doing some really advanced stuff, other than the error trigger, which I'm going to show you how to set up in just a second. So let's go ahead and add our first trigger here. I'm going to go ahead and do on chat message because it's really easy to test. And as I add that trigger, I'm going to see some options show up. Now, what's cool about N8N, you can kind of just click and drag to make things bigger, smaller. It's pretty intuitive. And then you're always going to have some sort of options. If I want to make that chat publicly available, it's going to give me a link to share to that chat. I can make it hosted. I can embed it. You can just run through the options and see what kind of stuff that you can do. You can come through options and see what other things you can customize, title, subtitle, chat styling, file uploads. You can give this chat quite a bit of power if you really take the time to. And you'll always see two options on the triggers and the actions. You'll see kind of the parameters. This is the main things that you'll customize for that node, and then settings, which are gonna look pretty similar across all of the different nodes. They don't change very much. You'll mostly leave the settings as is and then customize the parameters. Now, since I've got this little lightning bolt here. That lightning bolt usually means start the automation. In this case, it's open chat. And luckily, I can just communicate with this down here to test things. I'm just going to put my email, j@leadgenj.com. I'm going to send it through that chat. And as you can see, that went through. We got one record that went through as test data. Now, we're still in testing phase. Until this switch in the top right is switched to on, we are currently in testing phase. And if I double click into this node again, I can see the output. Now this is where you might freeze up and say, okay, I'm done. That's code. I don't know what to do with this. I want you to calm down for a second, and you're gonna get a lot more comfortable to seeing things in this format. This is JSON format. You don't need to learn how to write it. You don't need to even learn how to understand it. Better if you do, and I encourage you to actually learn this stuff. But if you come into the top right, you'll see that I can toggle between schema, table, and JSON. And this is the data that trigger just sent through. You're also gonna see a couple other things in this data. You're gonna see a magnifying glass, so I can search for the output. I can search for J, and it's gonna give me that. Sometimes you've got a ton of data that you need to sift through. You're also gonna see a pencil icon. So maybe you wanna edit your test data, because maybe you've got this giant workflow, and instead of running the entire thing again and consuming API credits, you just want to change the test data so that you can run it again. So if I wanted to change the email to jfeldman@leadgenj.com, I can save it, and now it's going to run with this new updated test data. And then finally, this pin in the top right. This is made for testing. N8N's done a great job of making the process of idea, testing, and finally making something live as seamless as possible. And there's a lot of tools in here that's going to make testing a lot easier, because remember, you're going to get stuck. There's no way around it. I guarantee you're going to get stuck as you're building. So understanding how to get unstuck and get around these things and test faster and test more efficiently is going to make your job a lot easier. All right, so now that we've got an action, let's talk about some of the things going on this workflow screen. So we've got a lot of stuff here, a lot of things in the top left, bottom, top right. What's going on? So the first thing you might want to do is name your workflow. I'm just going to call this a test workflow. You can also tag it up here. You can choose from existing tags or create new ones. In the top right, this is where you make an automation either active or inactive. My recommendation is to leave it inactive until you have several successful tests. This share button is not really relevant for the community version, but what you can do is if you come over to these three dots, you'll see options that you can use. And these are options that we do use quite frequently. You'll see duplicate. If there's an automation you really want to clone and just make some minor changes. If you want to download, which I use all the time. Remember, all of this is just code. This is all JSON code. Even really complex automations like this. If I download this, let's go ahead and download it. You'll see I just got a JSON file here. I can upload this to any AI model, and it's going to know exactly what I've coded here inside of this automation. And then if you ever want to import those automations, you do it the same way. So you go import from file, and you just import those JSON files that you would have downloaded earlier. Last thing I want to show you is settings. So each automation itself has settings that you should think about. So error settings and time zone settings are the most important ones and ones that I change almost every time. So I'm going to show you how to set up an error workflow. You can actually just copy mine, but it's actually not set by default. Now I'm going to be walking you through setting up your own error workflow. Everybody needs one. You only have to do it once. But what you are going to have to do on a consistent basis is come into the settings and designate an error workflow. So error workflow, mine is error logs, and you're going to be able to copy my error workflow as well. You want to know when one of these fails and what happened. The next thing you want to configure is time zone. So if your automation doesn't really take time zone into account, or the time that it's triggering into account, then it's less important, but I always change it when I add error logs, just in case there's ever a reason that time does become important. The rest of these I'll typically leave as is and hit save. Now, while we're talking about triggers, one of the coolest things about N8N, and one of the reasons I made the big decision to migrate everything from my make.com to my N8N, this is one of the reasons. It's the ability to add multiple triggers to the same sequence. So a lot of times you want to essentially run the same play, the same automation, but you have different forms and different methods of triggering that automation. For example, maybe you want to write and publish a blog automatically on your blog. And the things you want to trigger that to write and publish the blog could be a new YouTube video posted. It could be a new Instagram post. It could be a Reddit post that you found. All of those are different triggers that would essentially bring it down the same pipeline to write and publish that article. Well, now instead of having 3 different automations with the 3 different triggers and the same exact process, you can do it all with the exact same automation. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a second trigger here just to show you. I can either hit that plus button in the top right to open the Nodes panel, or I can hit tab. And I'm gonna be walking you through some of these shortcuts that's gonna make your building and testing a lot easier. So by hitting tab, I get this panel that opens up what happens next. And I've got all of these different actions. We're not gonna talk about actions just yet. We're still talking about triggers. I can add another trigger, and then we get the exact same menu. So one thing I'm gonna go ahead and add here is trigger manually. Maybe instead of chatting, I want a manual trigger, or maybe I also want to add another trigger. Maybe I also want this to trigger on a form submission. And I added this trigger and I see this red issue. Something's wrong with this trigger. Let's go ahead and investigate what that is and what it needs. If I hover over it, it says issues, parameter, form title is required. So let's go ahead and open it and see if I can resolve those issues. So we've got, perfect, it's guiding me on what to do, test form. And just like with the chat trigger, we'll see all of the different options for us, the form title, form description. I can add the form elements, so name, email, and you can change the element type, just like a regular form builder, date, email, file, upload, number, password. All these things are different fields that you can build into this form. And then coming all the way down, you can add additional options for the form. Now, if I ran through each option for every trigger and action that we're going to be talking about, then we could probably do this for days upon days. So I'm not going to run through these. Most of them are self-explanatory. You can customize it based on what you find in the options. But the most important thing is that now we're good. And I have this test URL and production URL. And this is important because you're going to see this not only with forms, but with webhooks. There's test data and production data. So while this is switched to inactive, meaning this switch is inactive, it's only going to be listening for this test data. So if I copy this URL and open it up, form trigger isn't listening yet. Okay, it's waiting for me to actually go ahead and execute this workflow. So to open it up, I'm going to execute the workflow. And just like that, it opened up the form for me with the test form, name, and email. And now let's go ahead and do jfeldman, j@leadgenj.com, submit. And now we've got test data here as well. And now I want to pin this test data so that I can continue to use it during my testing phase. So I can either open it up and I can hit that pin icon, or I can just select it. As you can see, it's highlighted. When I come off of it, it's not highlighted. Now it is. Now another helpful shortcut is you can select a node. As you can see, I select it. This little gray box went around it. Now this one's selected. Now this one's selected. Now you can use hotkeys to do a bunch of different stuff. If I hit enter, it's going to open up that node. If I hit D, it's going to deactivate that node. If I hit D again, it's going to reactivate that node. And if I hit P, it pins the node. However, there's no more test data here. Because I was clicking around and doing other stuff, I lost the test data. And that can suck, especially as you're building these big, complicated automations and you don't want to execute the whole workflow again, because maybe there's 9 AI steps in there and you don't want to burn through AI credits. So how do I get that test data back without hitting execute again and filling out this form again? I could do that, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to hit this stop button to stop waiting for that test data. And I'm going to come into executions. Anytime you execute a workflow, you're going to be able to come into executions and see those records. And then with N8N, I love how they did this. You can actually use those records in your test data as you're building. So as you can see here on the left, here's all the runs. That little scientific beaker, which is the icon for testing, lets me know this is a test execution. Now, if I want to use this test data again, I can just copy this to editor. I'm going to hit copy to editor, and just like that, we've got that data pinned. Now I can unpin it, pin it again, unpin it, pin it again. We're going to leave it pinned for the time being. Now, the other thing that I want to show you when you're testing triggers, setting up triggers, and getting trigger data, test trigger data, is the ability to just kind of come in here, even when there's no trigger data, and set mock data. So I can set essentially fake data. It's going to give me some templates here. And then you can just edit the JSON to give yourself test data to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this test data, name, J. Feldman, and then email. As you get better with JSON, you'll learn how to do this without using the AI assistant. But in this case, I would change it to parentheses, j@leadgenj.com, close parentheses. We're then going to make this valid JSON. And now I can save that test data, but I got an unable to save due to valid JSON. Perfect. I love that it gave me that. It gave me an error at position 68. Line 4, column 4. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this. And this is a great use case because I'm not great at coding. I don't really know JSON. I know just the basics and I can kind of manipulate stuff. Transform this into valid JSON. I'm going to copy and paste that code. Oh, I already know what's wrong with it, but it's going to go ahead and just do this for you. And then you can copy that, put it in there, make it valid, go ahead and hit save. Now we've got good test data to save. Now with your permission, before I move on to actions, I want to show you how to actually use these multiple triggers. I'll walk you through setting up the triggers. I may as well show you how to use them because if you don't know the next step to actually get these all to work in a workflow, it's not going to be usable. So even though this is going to be a little bit advanced, I really wanted to show you how this works. So a lot of times you'll have a form, you'll have a webhook, you'll have an app action, all converging different triggers on the same workflow. But when you converge them, the data needs to be formatted in the same way. So if you're going to use multiple triggers, you're going to come in here and you're going to use a set node. So we're going to go through these actions and details next, but I really want to show you how to actually use these multiple triggers. So we're going to use this set node, and I'm going to map email. Now it's important that this is titled the same. So I'm just going to do all lowercase email. I could also map the name, all lowercase, that's the full name. We're going to hit execute step, and now we've got that data here. Let's pin it. And then same thing here. We're going to use a set node. I can either hit that plus button, I can hit the tab button, or I can just go ahead, select this, Control C, copy to keyboard, Control V, just like you're in a Google Doc or a Word doc. Remember, this is just code that you're copy and pasting. So I copied and pasted that. Now I'm just going to connect the two. I'm just going to drag that from one to the next. And as you can see, it's the code that is copied and it's pinned. It's going to be the same data already pinned. And now you're going to see red. Something needs to get fixed, not interpreting something the right way. The reason for that is the nomenclature is different. This is all lowercase. This is looking for an uppercase email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace them. I'm going to delete this. Actually, I'm just going to delete that top one so I can show you something on the bottom. And then I'm going to drag email from there to here. Now on the left-hand side, you'll see right now I'm doing it in like the visually friendly version, the schema version. I typically either use schema or the JSON, but you should know that you can do the exact same thing. You can click and drag from JSON as well. And now it's green, which means we're good. The other thing that you'll see here is fixed versus expression. Fixed means it's not looking for code. It's just looking for text versus expression is code and needs to be JSON friendly. And you can do just plain text in expression mode. In fact, I almost exclusively use this expression mode, even when I'm doing plain text, because now I can blow it up and make it bigger. Makes it easier to work in. All right, so what if I wanted to change this to green without clicking and dragging again? Just to give you a little bit about how to use JSON. This is just pulling from the most recent record, JSON dot, and then the reason that it's not working is the name is coming through differently. Lowercase versus uppercase. So if I just delete that and say name, now it's going to map it correctly and it's going to be green. And then what you should always do is unpin and run it again. Just make sure it works. Cool. Now we've got good test data that's pinned. Now you would do the exact same thing for chat message, but let's go ahead and move into actions. Let's actually start using this stuff. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to delete the chat trigger, and then we're going to hide this bottom section. This bottom is where you can interact with the chat, see the logs, edit things. But to be honest, I rarely use it. I think it's distracting, so we're going to get it out of there. And always make sure that you're saving your workflows as you go. There is nothing worse than spending hours building a really complex workflow and testing, and then oops, you didn't save, server crashed, computer crashed, power went out, and you lose all of your work. So really important to save. And if you save, you can also recover old automations too. It actually has a lot of data here for what you've done in the past. All right, so now let's say we want to use both triggers. Either of these things could trigger the automation, and we want it all to converge on this one workflow that we're going to be building out. Now, no matter where it comes from, the data is going to be formatted exactly the same. It's going to look like this. So now all we have to do is click email, name, drag it in, and now we are mapped correctly regardless of where it comes from. Versus if we skip this step, remember email and name, one was capitalized, one was lowercase. So if this is expecting capitalized and it comes in lowercase, it's gonna fail and it's gonna be invalid. That's why you always want to make sure to normalize the data with this edit field step first. Sorry if that's a little complicated. These are things that I think you're going to need to know. I don't want to teach you anything complicated unless I think you're absolutely going to need it. So I apologize, but this next one is going to be a little bit of a doozy too for triggers. So I'm going to add another trigger here. And what I'm going to select is on webhook call. This is one of my most frequently used triggers because a lot of applications don't have direct integrations with N8N. Instead, you have to rely on sending webhooks from one to another. So let's talk about webhooks. What are they? It's essentially a link like this. You'll have a test and a production, just like with the chat and with the form. And that link is used to send and receive information. So if I copy that link, this is right now looking for a get, and I paste that link here, I can add information to the back of it by going email equals j@leadgenj.com. And when I visit that link, this actually triggers that webhook and sends that piece of data over. So let's go ahead and actually listen for test event, and I'm going to go ahead and visit that link. Workflow has started. It actually received that test data with the email. So that's all a webhook is. That's how it works. Now actually using them between two applications is what you're going to need to learn how to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this data for now. And then let's talk about test versus production. Whenever you're in the testing phase, the thing is flipped to inactive, you're going to want to use this test URL. This is the only one that's going to work to send and receive data. Once it's flipped to active, the only one that's going to work is going to be the production URL. So don't change them until you're ready. The next thing I want to show you is the HTTP method. You're really only going to be using two here. You're going to be using post and get. Get is just receiving information from that link. So like I just showed you, we've got the link with information at the end. We're just reading it. Versus post means somebody is sending us information in a bundled format. So here's an example of post. I'm gonna go ahead and grab our test URL. Now it's set to post, and I'm gonna come into my CRM. I'm in Go High Level. Most of your CRMs are going to have this function. I'm gonna go ahead and create a workflow. It's just gonna be a template workflow. And one of the actions in here is almost always going to be webhook. I'm gonna send a post webhook to that test URL link. Maybe this is triggered from a form submission in Go High Level, someone buying something, and I wanna get that data over and trigger an N8N workflow. Well, in order to communicate between High Level and N8N, this webhooks makes it really easy to do, because my alternatives are, let's actually go and see, add another trigger, High Level. There are no High Level triggers available inside of N8N. The only way that I can communicate with it is via API calls and via webhooks. All of these down here are actions, not triggers. So let's just call this N8N test. And let's just say I want to trigger this when somebody orders something. I'm just going to say any order submitted, trigger that webhook. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, save. This way it's going to be active and live. Remember, I've got that test webhook in here. It says webhook.test. And then I'm just going to go ahead and run myself through this automation. Now, before I do, I want to make sure that this is actually listening for new data. So I'm going to unpin this and I'm going to listen for test event. I'm listening at this webhook, and I'm listening for a post webhook call. So listen for test event, and we're going to select one of my contacts, one of me, and run it through this automation. And as you can see, boom, we have an output. It grabbed all of my contact data from GHL. I didn't have to change anything else on this webhook. That was really straightforward and easy to set up. So now I'm gonna go ahead and pin that data. But remember, when I make this live, it's no longer going to work. I'm gonna need to grab that production URL, come back in here, and I can either copy and paste that node and then add the production URL here as like a second one. Maybe you want the test one and the production one always in there while you're testing, or you can just replace it and get rid of the test webhook altogether. Just make sure that you do that step, or else your workflows are not going to work. Now, the rest of these HTTP methods, delete, get, head, patch, post, put, are typically only going to be reserved for API calls, which I'm going to show you. It's a little bit advanced. We're going to do it when we talk about actions. But for the purposes of triggers, it's almost always going to be post. Now, there is another little secret that I can show you, but I don't recommend doing this every time. Just do it if you really don't have another choice, and if you can't get webhooks to work, try this. Come into settings, allow multiple HTTP methods, and now you can come and select all of them. And now it's listening for all these different webhook types. And here's what that looks like now. It's got all of these as different webhooks. So maybe the other application is sending it to you and it's not as a post. Maybe it doesn't say, and maybe it's sending it to you as a patch. Well, now you can listen for test event here, unpin and test, and let's add another one of my emails in here. Now, as you can see, the output was successful, and I can see where it went to. So if you're struggling to get your webhooks to trigger, try that workaround, and chances are it's coming through as one of these other variables. So overall, webhooks, just a signal, a communication line between two applications. You can receive them like we're doing right now. We're receiving them from Go High Level. They're sending a signal to us. We're catching it on our end and using that data inside of an N8N workflow. Later on, I'm going to show you how to send a signal out to another application using like an outbound webhook. All right, more on webhooks later. Now let's get into actions. This is the fun stuff, because we're starting with a data set. That's your trigger. Something is making this automation go, and you're starting with sometimes a limited amount of data to work with. Remember, in this case, all I have is a name and email, and it comes through with a date as well. And the more data you have at the trigger, the more that you're going to be able to do later on. All right, now let's party. Let's talk about some actions. And by the way, if you're finding value so far and you want to thank me for making this free and publicly available to you on YouTube, and you think this is going to help, please do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel, like this video, and then drop a comment letting me know your thoughts, letting me know if it's helpful. And if you really want to set yourself up for success, go over to my school community. It's going to be linked down below. It's completely free. It's going to have a lot of additional trainings and resources, but most importantly, a community of people that can help you get unstuck and keep you in the loop as to what's working, what new tactics and tools are available. It's going to be linked down below. Definitely go join. It's free. It's going to be really, really helpful for you. All right, let's get into actions and talk about some of the stuff you can do inside of these workflows. So again, I can either hit that plus button, I can open up the tab and see some of my options here, or maybe I want to add an action between these two steps, because maybe I want to do something before I write to Google Sheets. Well, I can click that button here, and then it'll insert it between those two steps. So let's take a look at our options here. We've got AI, We've got action in an app. That's similar to trigger from an app. That's do something in another web application. There's data transformation. Maybe you need to reformat data, do some kind of calculation. There's flow. So maybe you want to do like an if-then path. If yes, go this way. If no, go that way. There's some core stuff, sending webhooks, making HTTP requests, running code. Human in the loop is kind of interesting. I don't use it too often, but it essentially waits for human feedback before continuing. Now, most of the actions that you're going to take inside of N8N and in general when you're building workflows is communicating with other applications, either getting information from one, sending information to another. So that's typically what you're going to want to be doing. So I'm going to click action in an app, and now you can search through the native integrations. These are all of the things that N8N natively integrates with. Now, in some cases, I do recommend actually choosing the software that you're going to use for your business based on what has clean integrations. Because a lot of times this is going to be the main way you're interacting with your software. For example, maybe you're trying to decide on MailChimp versus ActiveCampaign as your main email newsletter software. Well, before you make that decision, you should really take a look at what the native integrations look like and what the API capabilities are. More API capability and range means you can do a lot more. So if I wanted to make an automation where I sent an email campaign on autopilot, it writes the email, sends it to my list automatically, just triggered by an automation, I actually can't do that inside of ActiveCampaign. So let's go ahead and see some of the actions available here. I already know I can't because I've tried. And there's a lot of stuff that I can do. But if I search campaigns, all I have is on new campaign event as a trigger. Email, I have nothing. I can't send a newsletter to my ActiveCampaign list on autopilot. I can do all this other stuff natively, but I can't send an email campaign. That kind of sucks. However, if I come into MailChimp, I can actually send a campaign. So we selected MailChimp, send a campaign. Now, I don't use MailChimp. I use ActiveCampaign. It's a limitation of ActiveCampaign, but I love the software and great deliverability. And it just created this loop. And the reason for that is because automations need an end, and it can't end on an error. So I'd have to come in here and log into my credentials and stuff and send the campaign via the campaign ID. And for that reason, let's go ahead and get rid of it. I'm going to delete that loop. I don't know why that loop is there. We don't want it there. And let's add ActiveCampaign back. Now, just because it doesn't have a native integration for ActiveCampaign to send an email campaign in here on this list doesn't necessarily mean that we can't do it. So if I don't see it here and I'm trying to accomplish that goal with ActiveCampaign, what I could do is I could come to the ActiveCampaign API docs. I usually just search that and it should come right up. And it usually looks something like this, developers.activecampaign.com. And this is how you're going to talk to applications when either there isn't a native integration, maybe ActiveCampaign didn't show up on that list at all, or you want to do something inside of an application that isn't available to you on that list. So what I'm looking for is API documentation, and this is typically what it looks like. On the left, you'll see all of the different actions. These are things that we can do using their APIs. I'm going to be showing you exactly how to interact with this and to use this, but it is a little bit more advanced. You do need to learn it because if you don't, you're going to be limited in what applications you can interact with and what you can do with those applications. So I'm going to be showing you exactly how to do this, but for the purposes of learning actions, we're not going to talk about that right now. All right, now the first time you connect to any of these applications, let's go ahead and do ActiveCampaign, create an account contact. It's not going to have a credential signed in here, so you're going to need to sign in for the first time. So you're going to have to go and select Create New Credential, and it's going to open up something that looks like this. And a lot of the applications are different, and signing in can be a little bit annoying, especially in the community version. In the cloud version, you don't have to deal with a lot of this because it just talks to each other via the cloud, but sometimes you need a little help. So you're going to open the docs, and typically they guide you through connecting any of these applications. Cool, it walks me through it using the API key. You'll need an ActiveCampaign account and these two things. In ActiveCampaign, select Settings, Developer, and then copy these two keys. Now, I've already done this, but I'm going to go ahead and just follow the instructions and do it again. So let's go ahead and open up my ActiveCampaign. Now, chances are a lot of the softwares you already use are going to be very similar in how you connect. There's going to be some sort of section with an API key, and you're going to need to grab that API key. So let's come into Settings in my ActiveCampaign, Developer, and here we go, API access. I've got a URL and I've got a key. As you can see, I've also got webhooks here, stuff we just learned about, just talked about. So I'm going to copy that URL and key into my ActiveCampaign account. Now, I've already done this, and then you're going to hit save. And also label it if you've got multiple different accounts. And then you're signed in, and you never have to do that again. Now, some of them are going to be tricky, especially things like Google on the community version. This one took me a while to get the hang of. When you're trying to sign in to, let's say, Google Drive, and you want to upload a file. Well, you're gonna have to create a new credential on that Google Drive account. And this can be kind of annoying. Now, instead of walking you through the Google setup where you have to go to the Google Cloud console, come into the console, set up all of these keys, instead, I'm gonna show you how to get unstuck. If you're getting stuck on Google, you can go ahead and open the docs, run through these steps. If that's still not simple enough for you, what I want you to do is come into Perplexity. There's a lot of people who have probably gone through the exact same issue. Perplexity is going to find the highest ranking YouTube videos. They're going to give you a distilled walkthrough. How can I sign into Google Drive on N8N? Find me the best video walkthrough. And then you could even give Perplexity this link and it'll have some more context to search. I use this problem solving technique anytime I'm trying to solve a really unique issue that's not really code based. I'll come to Perplexity and try and find a walkthrough video that shows you how to do it. Now, a lot of people have made this video, how to do it in 5 minutes. Then you'll just use Perplexity, go through these videos. It gives you a really distilled walkthrough that I don't need to do here because other people have done it and you only need to do it once. Remember, if you only need to do it once, I typically don't need to teach it. I want to give you the powers, the superpowers, to be able to build whatever you want with the limit of only your imagination. So because you only have to do this once and it's a little bit ugly and I don't want to bore you, you can come into Perplexity and watch any of these 5-minute videos. It's just following step by step. All right, so that's how you use native applications, sign into those applications, and save your credentials. I typically do it just right from here. Whatever I'm trying to link, I'll pick that application. If I don't already have a credential, you'll need to create the credential. And now you can interact with these applications. And usually they're relatively self-explanatory. So let's come into one of these nodes and see what kind of options that we have. One thing people do really commonly is interact with Google Sheets. They like to database stuff either in Google Sheets or Notion or Airtable. So once you select it, it's going to walk you through, selecting the document from your list, selecting the sheet from that document, mapping the columns for you. So all you have to do is click and drag. If you ever update your sheet and you want to update this, you can hit these 3 dots and refresh columns list, and it's going to pull in any new columns. Or if you want N8N to try and map automatically, you can use this feature, and it's automatically going to try and put like the email in the email, the name in the name. But I like to have a little bit more fine-tuned control. Now you're going to encounter a lot of cases where you need to transform data, such as this one. Maybe I wanted only lowercase for the name, or maybe I want only uppercase. Well, that's going to have to be code. And I don't need to create another set and edit fields node. I can actually do it straight here in this node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my handy assistant and I'm going to say, make this all uppercase, and then give it the JSON code that we're using. And it's smart enough to be able to know exactly what you want it to do. And it's going to give you the code to do it. Now, this is a really simple one. Sometimes they're not so simple. Sometimes it's like remove all the emojis and remove all the spacing between the paragraphs, and it'll give you a much more complex code that you can use. But all you have to do is copy and paste that into your workflow. You don't need to know the code. You just need to know how to use the AI to get to your result. And just like that, it's going to be all uppercase. Now, you'll always have additional options at the bottom. And if it's your first time interacting with that software using this node, then you should always click on them. You should always see what's available to you, because you never know what crappy thing you might need to turn off. So in this case, there's nothing I want to do here, but sometimes there's stuff that you really need to do. I'll give you an example in a minute. But then coming over into settings, you're going to see these settings repeat in just about every action that you use, as long as it's interacting with the software. So let's walk through these because they are consistent, which makes them important. Always output data. So maybe instead of append row in a sheet, maybe I'm trying to find a row. So I'm trying to get rows, and I want to get via email. So I'm looking for rows, I'm looking by email. If it doesn't find anything, the workflow doesn't continue. I can't even run an if node. So let's go ahead and execute that step and see if it actually finds anything in my oh, cool, it did. It found a subscription for me. So that's the output, but what if it's looking for an output that definitely won't find? I'm gonna execute that step again, no data output returned, the whole thing stops. If I come into settings and I do always output data, that way, even if it doesn't find anything, it still has an output and it still continues. And this is really helpful once you wanna add things like switch or if-then statement nodes. So coming into flow, there's a lot of things you can do here. You can filter, you can do if, you can loop, you can merge, you can switch. And also you can wait. Now, I don't use most of these, but one that I do use quite frequently is if and switch. For example, a really common use case is, all right, if the data wasn't found in that spreadsheet, go create it. So you're gonna wanna do an if node there. I'm gonna add this if node. If the top is true, then it's going to continue. If it's not true, then it's going to go down this false path. I don't really have any output from that last one because it didn't find anything. But what if it did? If I wanted to test this correctly, let's go ahead and delete that. We're going to execute the step. And now we did have good test data. It found a record there. So when I'm setting up this if node, I'm looking at the rows from the sheet, and I just want to see if something was found to continue. So I'm just going to grab pretty much any data that it found, and then I'm going to give it the parameters. I see string, number, date, time, Boolean, array, object. Now it's already got number highlighted. The reason for that is this is coming in as a number in JSON, not in parentheses. So if I want to manipulate this data, I'm going to use the number. So if it exists, then true. And I like to title it. Now I'm going to add another condition just to kind of show you the difference between string, number, date, Boolean. Boolean is true or false. So sometimes it'll come in as just true or false, and that's going to be a Boolean record. It'll typically be highlighted, and then you'll be able to just use Boolean. So if I wanted to use a string, for example, then I would do string exists, or maybe string is equal to or contains lead. And this one does contain lead because there it is. Name lead. So execute step, let's give it a shot. True. It passed both of my filters. Awesome. Continue down that true branch. But what if I did that thing again where it outputs no data? Now I've got this new data here. I'm going to unpin. And let's see what it proceeds down. So I'm going to hit the play button and run this test again. It outputted some data. You can see the one came through. It did not pass my filters, and then it went down the false branch. So that's how I would set up an if node. Now the other thing that you could potentially use is a switch node. Let's go ahead and add a switch node instead of the if node. Now the switch node can have multiple different paths, where if is just true or false, switch is A, B, C, D, E, based on what it finds. So let's go into Google Sheets. I'm going to delete that 1, 2, 3 so it finds some test data. And then I want to do a switch. I want to add routing rules. Maybe I want 3 different pathways. So let's do amount. Now it wants me to do a number, maybe is greater than 50, go down pathway A. And you can rename the output. So greater 50. And you can rename the output. In this case, it's like purchase value because it's amount. Maybe I want to call it something different. Now, if the value is less than 50, maybe it goes down pathway B and so on and so forth. So executing that step, and great, we hit an error. That's actually a good thing because when we hit an error, now we can problem solve for it because you are also going to hit errors. So in this case, I'm going to show you something even cooler. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this error, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it into my little handy dandy assistant, fix the error please, and it's actually going to read that screenshot, figure out what's wrong, and give me the solution. So if then in the switch node, use this specific code. So let's see if that works. So it told me in the switch node, toggle convert types where required. Let's go ahead and see if I can do that. I'm gonna copy and paste that here. Add option, ignore case. Oh, here we go. It's right here, convert types where required. Now let's try again. Still didn't work. So I'm gonna copy and paste that. I'm gonna give it another error, and it's going to help me work through that error. Just like that, it gave me a much more long, complex code. Let's go ahead and see if it works. I'm gonna take a screenshot because it's still not working, and then it will go ahead and fix itself. Let's try it again. Boom, that code worked. I have no idea what this code means or why it did what it did, but I see at the end, I get the result that I actually want. I'm gonna paste that here as well, and then let's try it again. And just like that, it succeeded, and it pushed the values through. It worked. That is how you troubleshoot. You can use screenshots, just keep talking to it until you're able to resolve your issues. Funny, I was actually worried that I wasn't going to be able to hit any snags as I was showing you how it all works. So I'm glad we've actually been able to encounter a few because that's really where you're going to learn the most. And obviously just showing you the automations that I already have that are working isn't a good way to show you what doesn't work. So as you can see, these pathways, they're actually named now to help you keep track of them. So instead of purchase value, I'm going to usually do greater than 50, less than 50. This will help me keep track of what's what as they're going through these different paths. Now, one thing that you're going to notice here is it actually found 7 items in the sheet, and it's processing all 7 at the same time, which can be okay unless you're sending all of that data into an application at the same time. For example, Google Sheets has an API limit of about 10 per second, I think. So it's really easy to overwhelm Google Sheets with too much data at once. And sometimes that's not 7, sometimes it's 700. And you really don't want to push all that through at the same time. Now in Make or Zapier, it actually processes them one at a time automatically. But in N8N, it shoots them all through. So the way around that is to add a loop node. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that plus button where that 7 is, because that's really where I want to add that step. And I'm going to come into flow, or I can just type loop. Or if I don't know what to do or what node to choose, I would come into my little assistant and ask it what node to choose so it wasn't giving 7 at a time. So I'm going to loop over items. I almost always leave this batch size 1. No options enabled. And once I add that loop node, it's going to add a few things automatically that I don't necessarily want. And it always does this. You just have to delete them. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. I essentially want to start from scratch with my loop node. So what this loop is going to do is it's going to proceed through the loop as long as it takes to get through all of those 7 records. However, it is very important that everything loops back to that loop node. So to demonstrate this one, I'm going to delete that switch node and I'm just going to use these. I'm going to highlight both of them so I can click and drag them at the same time. Now, if I wanted to loop through all of these items, I need to connect everything back. So it's loop to the filter. Now, even if it's false, it's going to come back to the loop. Once this is done, it's going to come back to the loop. And now it'll loop through all 7 regardless of what happens unless an error is hit. And then once it's done, you can either leave this done as an empty string or you can trigger something else or get a reply. And this looping is really helpful, especially as you're going through like multiple rows in a sheet or if you're doing scraping, which I'm going to be talking to you a lot more about in a more advanced later section of this video. Now, I want to warn you here, looping can get annoying. So I'm going to show you a real use case and how it looks when it's implemented correctly. But a lot of times something will break the loop and it doesn't get through all of the items. And that can be really, really annoying. So you want to make sure everything is outputting and it keeps running. A lot of tests can be involved when using this loop module. Another thing you can do here, maybe you want to search for all of the records that match that specific name, and we've got 7, but maybe we only want to process 1 of them. Maybe it's just the most recent. So one thing I can do is I could come into options and I could output only the first matching row, and I could read rows until last row in the sheet, so I can do it at the Google Sheets level. Or I could come in here and I could add a limiter and keep either the first item or keep the last item. This way it's not going to cycle through all 7. It's just going to find either the first record or the last record. And the last thing I'll show you to control flow is using a filter node. So I'm probably going to be coming back to this one because it incorporates basically all elements of learning how to build AI automations. But in this case, let's look at the filter node. So I'm scraping Instagram Shorts in this step, and I really only want to keep the ones that are greater than 10 seconds. And I'm doing this before we hit that loop because remember, we need to keep a steady loop. So let's go in and let's find some test data from an Instagram scrape. So from this scrape, it grabbed 50 shorts, and I only kept 38 of the ones that were above 10 seconds because a short under 10 seconds, they're probably not saying anything. So I don't really care to transcribe it and get the transcript. So it's really good for filtering out data that you might not need or might not want or use. And then showing you how that loop works. Once it has that 38, it's looping through all 38 of those items, cleaning the caption, running this Apify actor, which is actually an HTTP request. And then this one is seeing if the transcript exists. So if it does find a transcript, it proceeds to use my AI agent. And if it does not find the transcript, it just loops back. So even if it's false, you're still connecting everything back to the loop. You can have no loose ends when you're looping. Now that doesn't mean it's going to loop over that data again. This was one of the common misconceptions that I had. It just means that it's connecting back so it can keep running through the data. The last flow control that I use quite frequently is actually the wait step. So sometimes, especially when you're making API calls, maybe you're pinging Google Sheets too many times. You want to actually add a wait step so it takes some time between each run to execute. You'll be shocked how often you want to throw this in, and it can fix an automation just by adding a few simple things there. The other thing that you can do, if you are getting errors from API timeouts or an AI model going down temporarily, is come into the settings in a lot of these and retry on fail. So I actually always set this to 5,000 milliseconds. That's 5 seconds between each run. And sometimes that 5-second break is all it needs to fix an automation from failing. Now, the rest of these I don't usually ever touch, but the retry on fail I do use a lot, especially when you're interacting with AI and especially when you're interacting with applications like Google, because Google can only handle so many API calls at once. All right, now let's talk about data transformation. So this one's not very sexy, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. And to be honest, I don't use it very often. So data transformation, let's take a look at some of our options here. You can run code. This is actually really helpful if you're trying to accomplish something unique. And you remember, you don't need to know how to code. All you need to know how to do is tell your AI assistant what you want the code to do. Date and time, if you want to manipulate those values, I usually do that just by talking to this assistant. Let's say I needed to manipulate the date here to be in a specific date. Now, instead of coming back into my schema, into previous submissions to get today's date, what I could do is just start typing. I'm going to do 2 open brackets like that. And now it's actually going to start giving me some suggestions. So JSON, now is a date field, methods, metadata. Now, I don't like to deal with this stuff because it's code and I can always just come in here and ask my AI assistant. Remember, I'm not teaching you how to code. I'm teaching you how to use this effectively, efficiently, without learning robust skills that you will never really need to know. So I can go ahead and just hit now, and I've got today's date, but I've got it in this weird format. I could also, of course, just come into today from this trigger, and maybe I just want it in like a simple format. I'm just gonna copy that code and say, make the date format, month, day, year. And it's just gonna give me that code so I don't need to use the data manipulation tool to do that. I just have to copy and paste what they give me here, and it does it all for me. Unbelievably easy. It's a way better workaround than adding these data transformation nodes to try and manipulate the date. In fact, all of these things, get time between dates, round a date, subtract a date, I would literally just tell this AI assistant what you want to do, the math equation, and it'll give you a code like this to manipulate that date and give you the right date. Edit set fields we do use a lot, specifically to normalize the names of fields. And there's one other more advanced use case that I'll show you in just a minute. So we already talked about filter, limit. Another cool feature is remove duplicates. So if I wanted to remove duplicates, I could do selected fields, fields to compare. Let's do email, and then execute that step. It removed all the duplicates with the same email, and now I'm left with one item. So if you're trying to deduplicate, this can be a really nice tool to use. So one of the tricky things to figure out as you get better at no-code automation is how to manipulate data. Data can come to you, maybe you've got a list of Instagram URLs, and it's all in one input, and you've got 50 of them coming to you all at the same time in something called an array. Well, if you're getting that sort of data coming in all at the same time and you want to split it out into different outputs like this, where I'm getting like 38 items, then you might need to use something called split out. And this will actually separate the data for you. And if you want to combine those 7 into a single output, you can do that through aggregate. Merge, I never use. Summarize, I never use. Compression, I never use. I'm doing my best here to skip through things that I don't think you're going to need because either I've got workarounds for it or it's going to be such an edge case that it's not worth for you learning right now as a beginner. In fact, most of these you won't ever have to use. Now, convert to file and extract from file are points that you might need to use as you're trying to work with documents or images and it's giving you binary data or JSON data and you need to convert it between the two. There's also different text forms. There's plain text, there's Markdown, and there's HTML. Those are the 3 that you're going to need to know, and some of these tools can help you switch between the 3. This is kind of a cool example of what those 3 are. But here's what HTML looks like, here's what Markdown looks like. Sometimes you'll need to convert between them depending on where that text is going. For example, if I'm putting text into Asana or into a Google Doc, I want it in Markdown because Google Doc can read Markdown and it'll add formatting, it'll add titles. Versus if you're using a Gmail module to send an email, it actually wants it in HTML. So this is a good way to convert them from Markdown to HTML. And it's also important to note that if you're using AI to generate copy, you want to tell it what output format that you want based on where it's going. All right, so listen, I know that all of the flow controls, how to go from one path to the next, how to manipulate data isn't the funnest thing, and it doesn't feel like you're going to need these things, but I promise, you're going to be building an automation one day, and you're like, oh crap. I think I need to split out this data, or I think I need to manipulate that data. These nodes are ones that you're going to get better at as you go, and they're honestly the biggest difference between using something like N8N and Make and Zapier. It's the manipulation of data as it goes from point A to point Z. So the more of these situations you get yourself in where you have to change the flow or change the data, the way that it's displayed, the better that you're going to get at solving these problems on the fly. All right, now let's talk about 2 actions that are a little bit more advanced, but are going to unlock a whole other world for you in terms of capabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and detach this guy here. And what I want to do is send out a webhook. Instead of receiving it and having a webhook trigger an automation, maybe I want to send some data to Zapier to trigger an automation over there with an integration that's much easier to use or is only native to Zapier. Or maybe I want to send it to my friend's software. They don't have a great API, they don't connect, but I can tell him to just listen for my webhook. Especially if you're communicating between like my N8N and your N8N, the way that I would get that data to you is via sending you a webhook, and you would be monitoring that webhook URL. So here's how it works. First, you're gonna need to set up that webhook somewhere where you're gonna be receiving it. Remember, the receiver of that webhook is the one that creates the webhook and has the webhook to send. So in this case, let's go ahead and use this Zapier automation that I mentioned earlier. I created a trigger, Webhooks by Zapier, to catch hook, very common trigger in Zapier. And then Zapier gave me that webhook. So this is where I want to send data to. So I'm going to copy that webhook and go back into my N8N. Now, in order to send data to that webhook, I'm going to use an HTTP request. Not a webhook, an HTTP request. Remember, there is no action for send webhook. This is send webhook. In fact, this is the same node that you use to make any API call. So I'll come into HTTP request. The method is going to be post. That's also what Zapier is listening for because you're posting data to that webhook. The URL, we're just going to copy and paste what Zapier gave me. And then this will work. I can trigger that webhook, but no data is going to come through. So I actually need to map the data that I want to use onto this webhook. So I'm going to go ahead and send query parameters. And I can do this using JSON, but fields are typically easier. I'm going to go ahead and I want to send the name and I want to send the email. And that's really all I need to do to trigger that webhook. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up Zapier just so you can see it come through and how it comes through. But there's nothing else I need to do for this webhook. I'm going to execute step. It's sent. Awesome, success. Now let's come into Zapier and find new records. And just like that, we've got name and we've got email. Now we've got data that I can actually use, and I can do it inside of any application. Zapier, Make, any software application that I'm trying to communicate with, your N8N channel. So it's a really powerful and easy to use tool once you kind of understand how it works. And you always want to title it, send data to Zapier. That's pretty much it on sending webhooks. Now let's talk about something that's a little bit more nuanced and advanced, but something you absolutely need to know if you're going to start building to the fullest of your capacity inside of N8N. And that's how to make an API call using N8N. So imagine N8N did not have a native integration for ActiveCampaign. And I wanted to talk to it via API and see if the contact exists in ActiveCampaign, or maybe even create contact in ActiveCampaign. I'm going to come into the API documentation for ActiveCampaign. And if you can't find the API docs for the software you're trying to communicate with, use Perplexity. It makes everything so much easier. So you're going to want to come and find the action that you want to take. So in this case, let's say search contacts, list, search, and filter contacts. So let's come here and see all the options available to me. As you can see, there's a lot more options here than natively inside of N8N. Once I found what I want to do, let's look at what information that they gave me. We've got get, we've got a specific URL that we need to hit, we've got credentials, and usually a place for us to put our API token. And when you're running a get API call, remember it's typically only going to be get or post. When it's get, you're usually using the URL to make the request. When it's post, you're usually sending the data via the form like I just did, or via JSON. So let's try and run a get and then we'll do a post. So to find my API key for ActiveCampaign, you'll log into your account, you'll copy your API key, and then I can either put this in here, because it's just going to give me a C URL that I can copy, or I can do it all inside of N8N. I do recommend setting up your API key here if it allows you to do so, because it makes setting it up a lot easier. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy that. I'm going to copy that C URL request. Actually, before I do that, it looks like it's giving me the ability to add my account name here as well. So your account name.api.us, that's just lead gen J. Let's come back in and input that here. So now we're even closer because we've got most of the information that we need to talk to my instance of ActiveCampaign. So we're going to copy that C URL, and we're going to come in and we're going to do another HTTP request. Now this is a really cool feature in N8N. Most API docs will have something like this, where you can create a C URL request and you can copy it. Then you can come right back in and import that C URL here. And then you paste it, and it's going to do all of the mapping for you. Because half the time, the struggle and the confusion with doing API calls is, okay, do I send query parameters? Does it want it as JSON? What structure does it want it? Do I send it as a body? Does it want JSON or a raw file? So if you just copy the C URL, you're able to skip a lot of that confusion. Now, I'm pretty much set up for my API call right now, but I'm going to come back to these docs, and it looks like I can search by a few different things. Now, I want to search by email. And this is what an output should look like. It gives you all the info on that lead. So if I want to search by email, let's come back in and let's see. This is the search URL. This right here is the API URL. And then all of these are the different search parameters. So if I want to search by email, search equals null, segment ID equals null, status equals 1. So what I think I need to do is just search equals the email. So I'm going to do search equals, and then I'm going to go back to where I got rows in sheet. And I'm just going to find the email. And so look, if I drag it in there, it actually does it all wrong because it was still in fixed. I'm going to go back. And anytime I want to grab data from the left-hand side and add variables, make sure it's in expression mode. It's a good reminder. And then search equals, instead of null, we want to search by the email. And I'm actually going to add this limiter back in too. So I don't want to search all 7 items. I just want to search that 1 item. We're also going to get rid of that webhook just so we can focus on the API call to ActiveCampaign. So now I think it's all set up. That looks good. Everything's green. We've got our API token in there, and we're doing a GET request because that's what it says in the documentation, GET. So let's go ahead and execute that step and see if it found anything. Cool, it actually did find something. It found a contact in there, it found one item, and that's awesome. For future steps, I'm gonna be able to use that data. So let's go ahead and name it, Get Contact Active Campaign. So cool, successful API request on our first try. Now let's try and create a contact using a post request. I can either copy and paste, or I can try and do this from scratch. Let's go ahead and do one from scratch. In this case, we're gonna try and do it the same way. We've already got our credentials in there. We've already got our base URL in there. So let's see what this API call wants. And not all of them are this easy. This actually looks kind of nice, but you want to fill this in as many places as possible, and it's going to make your request a lot easier. So let's come into body parameters because it's going to want some info. Say j@otterpr.com as the email. Allow null email. Let's do false, first name J, last name Feldman. Maybe I just want the name and email in there. Remember, everything that I'm putting on the right-hand side is actually creating that CURL request on the right. This is going to help make the API call so much easier. So let's go ahead and copy that now back into N8N. Before even changing GET, I don't even need to touch this stuff. We can go ahead and import the CURL, and it's automatically going to change it to post. We've got our API token, and this is how it wants to receive data. It saved us so much time because now it's the JSON that it's actually expecting. So we're going to flip this over to expression. I'm going to hit this icon in the bottom right to open it up, make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to drag it a little bit to make the fields a little bit better. And we're just going to change the values. So email, we're going to drag that back to where that should be. First name, last name. And that is valid JSON. That is going to trigger the API call correctly. Now, do you remember earlier when we were formatting the date and we were using all of this code here? Well, if you try and do this, not in a form field, this is a form field. If you try and add this like huge code to transform your JSONs, but instead you're doing it inside of an API call, a lot of times this can cause problems. So what you would need to do if you wanted to format it like this is actually set the date node in a set node before the API request. So you would add a set node here, set the new date with that code, and then use that field when you're doing your API request. Just a random little hint that's gotten me stuck a bunch of times, so hopefully that saves you some time. And being able to do these API calls between different softwares is really gonna unlock superpowers. Just about every automation that I use, advanced automations, will have some sort of API call. And this one I'm talking to Appify to do something that I can't do through their native application here. So it just makes things a lot easier. You're able to do a lot more and build a lot more if you know how to quickly figure out what API capabilities are and then implement those API calls. It's also another great opportunity to use Perplexity. And I love Perplexity for searching use cases and stuff like that. Find me instantly API call for getting a thread conversation. And it'll actually go through the API documentation, search through what people are saying, and find the instructions for me, and ideally find the exact document and place in the document for me. Yeah, just like that, that's the API call that we need to make. And then, of course, we've got a direct link to the Instantly AI developer docs. All right, now I want to show you something else cool that you may or may not need, but sometimes you're going to get stuck trying to do something and there's really no good solution to it. So someone will have developed a solution, built a community node that solves a specific purpose. So let me show you something here. I'm going to hit 0 to zoom in. By the way, you can do 1 to zoom out, 0 to zoom in. You can do the pluses and minuses to zoom way in and out. And as you're scrolling, you'll see this little trackpad on the bottom left. You can actually navigate through your automations really easily. This gets really helpful once you've got gigantic automations. So one problem that I've faced when building automations in N8N is I'm always trying to make a Google Doc that I'm going to give to a client or give to my team to generate a report, and you want that Google Doc to be formatted. Now in Zapier, you can create a nicely formatted Google Doc just by pasting the markdown in there because they have a good clean integration. But with N8N, that's not really possible. And it's hard to get a good formatted Google Doc. So what I used here is actually like a community node. It's an API call to a node that this guy made using my Google Docs API, and it essentially fixes that problem for me. It's a workaround from N8N's Google Doc node, and this one does it formatted, whereas I can just give it my markdown output and a title, and it creates that Google Doc for me in a nice formatted way. So the reason I'm mentioning that is sometimes you're gonna find a problem that there is no good solution to, and you should know about the community node database. So let's come into my settings really quickly and come into community nodes. And these are nodes that you can install into your N8N instance that now you can have access to. For example, Appify. Appify is not a native N8N integration. It's integrated through a community node. Same thing with my 11 labs. So let's go ahead and hit install and let's browse. Let's see what's available. It's really good for you to be able to come in here and search for things that you want to solve. So these are all nodes that people have created connecting to Google Search Console, text manipulation. There's a lot of problems that people have also encountered and actually built solutions to. So coming into this community node, you can install them really easily inside of your N8N instance. This is the SERP API. If you want to access that, you can just copy that install link there, come back to your N8N instance, and just drop the package name here. Go ahead and hit I understand, install. And just like that, I now have access to this additional node and connection that I didn't originally have access to. And as you're searching, you might come across something that you want to use, Search API. And as you can see, it's not already installed. This is something that's developed by somebody else. So you can see how many downloads it has, and then you can just one-click install it directly from your workflows. So typically, these have been really safe for me, they've been effective, and they can solve a lot of your problems. All right, picking up where we left off, the next major action item that you're gonna learn how to use, and this is really gonna unlock the next level. I call this level 3 of AI automation. And that is integrating AI and agents into your N8N workflows. And back 10 years ago when we were using Zapier to connect softwares together, it was awesome because we were able to make things communicate, it streamlined business operations. But with the emergence of AI and how we're able to integrate it into our workflows, it really unlocks a whole new realm of possibilities and lets us replace what humans could do, because now our automations can think and make decisions. So this last main action that I want to show you is actually using AI. And this kind of deserves an entire module in and of itself, because there's just so much that you can do here, so many models to choose from. So I'm gonna do my best to simplify it and give you just what I do and what I think you are going to need to start using AI inside of your automations and doing it the right way. So the first thing you need to know about bringing AI into your N8N and using it inside of your automations is that there's a lot of different models to choose from. And it's really helpful to know which model to use for what. On any given day, one model can beat another. As these new models and versions get released, by the time you're watching this, Claude might be better than ChatGPT or vice versa. So it's important to have a good understanding of how to analyze the models and choose the right one. But I'm gonna make this as simple as possible for you, and I'm gonna give you some cheat codes. Before you start playing with AI and using these as actions, I want you to do me a favor and go to openrouter.ai. Now this is a website that really makes integrating AI super easy. Now OpenRouter does a few really cool things we're gonna chat about in just a second, but I wanna first show you, as you can see, I've got ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, all pinned here. This is essentially using AI in their native applications, where you're able to, have conversations, go back and forth, correct things if something's wrong, make modifications. Well, inside of N8N, when it's an automated workflow, you can't really talk back and forth. This is where prompting becomes really important. But not just what prompt, but what model you're choosing for which use case. If you're doing copywriting, right now you should be using Claude. If you're doing search, you should be using Perplexity. For most reasoning, I like to use ChatGPT. But to get this from in the ChatGPT browser to inside of my N8N automation, I need to use API keys. So ChatGPT has one, Claude has one. They all have a different, essentially entirely different site that you would go to get those API keys. So if I wanted to get an OpenAI ChatGPT API key, I'd have to go to platform.openai.com. I'd have to put in my billing, generate an API key here, and essentially do that for all of the different large language models. Now, if you want to shortcut all of that and not have to go get API keys and put in billing for all these different AI models, what you can do is sign up for OpenRouter, and you can just load your payment info for them, get one API key, and now you can access all of the AI models through OpenRouter. It doesn't cost anything additional for those credits. You'll be paying the exact same, and there's some other really cool benefits too. So if you're not sure what to use for what, you can come into rankings inside of OpenRouter and see kind of what the leaderboard is, what people are using, what kind of market share they're taking, For categories, what's the most popular for programming? For marketing, what's the most popular for translation, legal, finance? Maybe you want to make like an AI legal bot. Well, I can see that people are primarily using Claude Sonnet for legal. Another really cool thing you can do in here, and I use this all the time, is if you come to chat, sometimes you're not sure which model's going to respond the best to your prompt. Whether it's a reasoning prompt, critical thinking, copywriting, translation. Some of them excel more than others, or some of them just resonate better with some people than others. So if I want to test a prompt, maybe on all the flagship models, I can just click flagship. I can also add models here to see how different ones will respond. And then I can prompt it once here and see the different responses from all of the different models. Write me a viral TikTok script about N8N. And then I can see what model gives me the best result there. And then I can choose that model. And then I can choose that model to bring inside of my N8N automation. So as you can see, Claude is producing a result right now. We've got Gemini producing a result. And then I can go through all of these and see which one was best. So for OpenRouter, you'll just sign up for an account. You'll link your billing information. I have mine on auto top up, so it just takes credits from my OpenRouter account. Then you'll generate an API key. And this is the API key that you'll bring inside of your N8N account. And if you want, you can actually come into integrations and look at them one by one and bring in your own API keys. So even if you do select OpenRouter, it'll use your Claude API. So maybe you want access to some models, but some you want to use your API key. You can add your own API keys here. And the other beautiful thing about this is sometimes the models fail, or your key fails, or your billing runs out. Well, by default, if your key encounters a rate limit or failure, OpenRouter will fall back to using the shared OpenRouter credits. So this just gives you an extra layer of protection to make sure that your workflows and agents don't fail. So with that being said, let's go ahead and click on AI and see what kind of options that we have. Well, it's got all the main AI models. You can bring in Anthropic, Gemini, OpenAI. You can do some fancy stuff here. Honestly, I don't use anything nowadays except for these AI agents. In fact, pretty much the only time I won't choose AI agent is if I need to do something with AI that's not outputting copy or intaking copy. So for example, if I wanted to create an image with ChatGPT with OpenAI, I can analyze image or generate an image. And that's when I would choose OpenAI as my step instead of using the agent. With ChatGPT, I can also transcribe recordings, generate audio, do a lot of really, really cool stuff. With Anthropic, it has a model that can generate prompts. So maybe you want to generate specific prompts, but that's still outputting copy. So in almost all cases, I'm going to choose AI agent. And this is where I want to spend some time talking about, because you're going to be using this a lot. And if you really get the hang of working with these AI agents, there's going to be just about nothing that you can't do. So what is an AI agent and how does it differ from what we used to do with workflows and automations? Well, you may have heard agentic workflows. So essentially what an agent is an AI step that has access to a few things. It has access to memory, so it remembers past conversations. It has access to tools. Maybe it wants to access your Notion or your Google Sheets. And then it can work circularly instead of linearly where a workflow goes left to right. An AI agent can spend multiple steps inside of this one agent, going back and forth, accessing new tools, checking past chat history, and making decisions and thinking and reasoning all inside of this AI agent. And this allows you to take what would normally be really complicated giant workflows with lots of if-then statements and bring it all into a prompt with this AI agent that's able to think and reason and then just give you the right output. So let's break down the AI agent so you can fully understand it. Essentially, it starts at its very base is just an AI model. As you can see, there's one red star here. The one thing that this needs is a large language model to power the agent. And you can choose any of these large language models that are already native to N8N. So you can go through and you can connect these one by one, or you can just connect your OpenRouter that you just set up. So we're gonna go to chat model and we're gonna choose OpenRouter chat model. Now, once you open up your AI agent, you're gonna see a few things here. You need to configure this the right way. Now, as a base model, an AI agent is essentially just a prompt to any of the large language models. This is why I tend to reach for the agent over an OpenAI or a Claude or a Gemini, because essentially it's the same thing. I'm able to set a user prompt. I'm able to set a system prompt just like you would when prompting OpenAI directly. So this one, let's go ahead and just show you. I'm gonna do OpenAI, message a model. This would be like the equivalent, except one is an agent, one is just message a model. Message a model, you have your user prompt, and typically you'll have a system prompt. You'll choose the model here, 4.0 latest. The user prompt, I typically use that for the variables. This is the data that I'm inputting from the previous step. So I'm only feeding the user prompt variables. And for the system prompt, this is going to be the prompt for the agent. So act as a X, your goal is to Y, follow these rules, 1, 2, 3. And then that's kind of my structure. User message is the variables, and always a system message that has kind of the overall direction for the agent. Now coming over to this AI agent, it's essentially the same thing. It's almost always source for prompt defined below because you're going to be pulling from earlier steps. Now if you're using a connected chat trigger node, that's different. I actually don't know why it defaults to that. It should always be defined below. You'll input the variables, and then same thing as messaging OpenAI, you'll have a system message. And then you can add additional options that are very similar to the OpenAI message. Now to make this exactly the same as this, we just need to add OpenAI as a chat model. So I can either add OpenAI here, where I'm adding it directly, or we can do what I just showed you and get OpenRouter. And through my connected OpenRouter, I can choose all of these different models, whatever I want, without having to bring in those API keys. So if I want to use Grok and I don't have a Grok API key, no problem. Now I can use Grok 4. And just like all the other AI models, I can set the frequency, the temperature, and all of these other variables. Now I don't want you focusing too much on these because they're a little advanced and you should be okay just leaving them. The one I should mention is sampling temperature. So the temperature is how creative you want this thing to be. For reasoning, you want it just to decide if it's a good fit or not. You want to evaluate an email. You don't want it to be very creative. So I'd set that sampling temperature around 0.1, 0.2. Versus if you're writing a tweet, you might want that at like 7 or 8. So at its base, now this is the same as this, except it's a lot more flexible. If I wanted to make it exactly the same, I would just come in and do GPT 4.0. And now it's exactly the same with the user message, the system message, powered by the exact same large language model. So why would I ever reach for OpenAI instead of reaching for an AI agent? Because if I decide to, I can give this agent a lot more juice. So let's come back into this agent now that you understand kind of my thought process, why I always reach for the AI agent. And let's look at some of the other cool stuff that we can do inside of this agent. There's some additional options. I almost never select them. What's really cool, and this is a relatively new feature, is fallback models. So a lot of times your billing will be an issue in OpenRouter, and you'll need to fall back to a second choice. With OpenRouter, it already has fallbacks built in, but now you can select a fallback model as well. So maybe I want to fall back to Sonnet 4 from Claude. Another fun little trick here, tidy up that little broom in the bottom left. Just kind of makes it pretty. So okay, I've got my chat, I've got my fallback model. Honestly, I never need my fallback model because my OpenRouter has a fallback built in. The next thing you can do for your agent is actually give it memory. So I'm just gonna turn off fallback, and let's click memory. I can either click it here, or I can come out and click it here. And then let's take a look at some of my options. These are different databasing and like vector databases that you can use. I typically use Postgres. I'm gonna save that for a more advanced step when I talk about knowledge basing. But if you're just getting started and you want to give it some simple memory, you can actually just use their built-in memory. And session ID you can define below. Now, if it's a chat, maybe I'm chatting with Jay Feldman. And every time I get a workflow coming through, it has that name. So I just remember, okay, this is the conversation that's assigned to that person. So when Jay Feldman comes back up, it remembers the last 5 messages with Jay Feldman. Versus maybe you want to write tweets and you want to make sure that you're not repeating the same tweet over and over again. You can just say tweet writer, and then it's going to remember the last 5 tweets that had the key tweet writer, and they all do. The memory is really, really helpful, specifically for chatbots. If there's anything you're chatting with, for example, like my Telegram bot, where I'm chatting with my EA and it's doing things for me, I need it to remember my last messages. Now, probably the most powerful thing about these agents is their access to tools and their ability to check tools and utilize tools more than once in the same circular workflow request. So let's come into tools and see what kind of options that I have. So from the top, I can actually call other workflows as a tool. So that's kind of cool. Maybe I want to go call a research agent that I've built somewhere else in N8N. I can run code, I can do an API request, I can connect tools from an MCP server. MCP servers are a little bit more complex, probably too complex for this video, but essentially if I give it like a Notion tool, so maybe I want it to check like my Notion database for some information. You'll connect your Notion as normal, and then you can go ahead and select, I want a page search, and then I want to maybe search the text, lead gen J, maybe I want to return all, maybe I want to let AI decide. This is an interesting button, let the model define this parameter. Honestly, I usually leave that on. So search text too, you can let the model define that parameter. And now the AI agent is going to fill those fields out for you. So when in doubt, just go ahead and turn that on. Now this tool that I just gave it access to can only do one thing. It can search pages in Notion. However, if I was using an MCP for Notion, it would have access to all of the tools that are available in Notion. So instead of giving it access to a single function, you give it access to all of the functions. Now, I recommend just coming in and seeing what's compatible. A lot of times it's looking at databases, it's accessing information, it's doing research. I'll a lot of times give it access to Perplexity to actually go and do research on the thing that it's outputting. I'll just go let it define the model. And then you can also give it access to knowledge bases. So remember, we've got simple memory, so it remembers its last inputs and outputs. But if you want to give it access to a knowledge base, for example, a support bot, maybe someone asks a specific question, you want it to go into the knowledge base to find the answer. These are all different ways to give it access to the knowledge base. They're called vector stores. So I'm going to show you how to set this up a little bit later on, but I'm going to go ahead and give it access to my Supabase vector store. This is my knowledge base, my vector knowledge base, where it can actually look up information. Retrieve documents as a tool for agent, that's what I want it to do. Description, here's where you'll give it a prompt for what to look at, and then you can tell it where to actually search for that information. Now there's some additional stuff that you can do that's a little bit fancy. You can re-rank the results. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this video as well, but this just helps you get a more accurate knowledge base response. So remember, knowledge bases can get really big and really ugly, and they can have a ton of information in them. And if it pings it searching for a specific key term, it could come back with 20, 30, 40 responses that somewhat match. So this re-ranker will actually help go through all of those results and find the best ones. The last thing that you can do with these AI agents is require specific output formatting. So as you're working in these workflows, you need to make sure the data is outputted correctly. So you might want your agent to give you like 3 variables. And let's just look at a real world example. This thing is writing the Instagram scripts for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. And as you can see, I want 3 outputs. I want how relevant their transcript is to videos that I want to make, an explanation of the relevance, and then I want the new script that it generates for me. And if I want to make sure that it's in those 3 outputs, because remember, I'm using the outputs to database it, to put it into Airtable so that I can use it. But sometimes the AI models aren't perfect. And even if you tell it to do that in your system prompt, it still doesn't give you the right output. So to make sure it does, you go ahead and click Require Specific Output Format, and then you'll set up your structured output parser with an example of how you want it to output data. You can then auto fix the format. So if it does still misfire and give it to you in the wrong format, it'll actually use AI to reformat it before moving forward. So remember, the name of the game is to predict and anticipate any errors that this thing could throw. And all of these are precautions that N8N put in place to make sure that they don't error. Because if they error, now you have to go and investigate and fix. So it's better to put those precautions in place before you actually turn this on and make it live. So coming back into giving it access to the knowledge base, that's the re-ranker. You don't necessarily need that, especially as you're starting out. And to be frank, you don't even need to use a vector knowledge base because this Notion is essentially a knowledge base. It's searching for the resource in a specific page. You can have all of your information in like an FAQ database, which I do. So maybe I want to give it access to my team FAQ. Now I can set the title and I can have it look for specific questions. I can use the AI to define the rich text, and now it'll search in my Notion database instead of using a more complex vector store, which is better for lots and lots of information, but it is slightly more complex and there is a learning curve. Again, I'll walk you through setting up a knowledge base inside of Supabase a little bit later on in this video. So just to recap AI and AI agents inside of N8N, almost all of the time you're gonna select AI agent. Now you do not need to give it memory and tools for each time that you use an AI agent. You might just wanna be using it just like this, just like you would normally message a model. And it's gonna take the same amount of time, but you're gonna have a lot more capabilities with that AI agent. That's why I'll almost always default to using the AI agent and using OpenRouter to select the model that I want. And if you do that, you're gonna be safe most of the time. However, if you wanna use AI to do something else, generate images, transcribe something, analyze an image, then you're probably gonna wanna use one of the native models, like this OpenAI message model. And then you're gonna be able to do more with different formats. And the last action that you can potentially take using N8N is using a human in the loop trigger. So they have this option down here, human in the loop. What this essentially does is lets you review something before it actually goes live. And I'm gonna give an example actually setting this up when we build a workflow together. But before this existed, we would typically have to, it would like send me an email with the information, I would review it, and then I would like fill out a form to trigger the next automation. Well, if it's as simple as just like clicking a button or responding to a chat to push something through, that's what this is about. It's about streamlining operations, making you not have to submit forms. It's as easy as clicking a button to approve or disapprove of something. And there's a few different options for where you can receive that message or that button. I'm typically using Gmail or send email in mine. But if you set up the Telegram bot, you can also do it in here. All right, what do you say we actually build an automation? One thing I've been wanting to set up for a while is an automation that posts to Twitter on autopilot for me, does some research, writes a viral tweet, and actually posts it to my Twitter account on a schedule, because I don't think I post on X at all. And actually just set up an X developer account just by following their documentation so that I can actually start doing this inside of N8N. So let's go ahead and go home. We're done with the learning automations. Now we're actually gonna start building. Now, before we actually start building, I want you to make sure that you have an error logger set up. An error logger starts with this error trigger. You only need to set it up once, and you only need one of them. You're gonna trigger it with this error trigger, and it triggers anytime there's an error anywhere else in your N8N account, as long as you've selected it in your setting. Now here's a little trick. Because Google Sheets has such a low API limit and it often crashes if you overload it, and I've got a lot of automations running and some of them error multiple times in a row, and that can crash Google Sheets. I actually use Supabase here to database my errors. So if I ever need to check the errors, I can go into Supabase. You can also use Airtable. But essentially how it works is it's triggered on this error. Basically any error comes through, here's the data that I get, the message from the error, which node errored. And then one cool little feature to go from node to node is if I just go to the right side of the screen, the next node pops up so I can see get a row. I'm actually searching for that error in the database. So I'm getting a row from this table, I'm inputting the data that I'm looking for, the next node. If it does not exist, then move forward. I'm trying not to repeat errors in my database, so I'm not getting the same Gmail 1,000 times. And then it just sends me a notification to my Gmail. Hey, this is the error in the workflow. This is the error message. This is the workflow name. This is the direct URL to it. This is the node that errored. That way I can know when an automation goes down, what happened, and get back to it and fix it really quickly. So before you start building a ton of automations, make sure that you have this set up. And you can copy this exact JSON template just by importing it, and you're gonna be able to download it inside of my AI Automation Insiders in school. Now, even though it says inactive, you're not gonna be able to make this active because it's a really unique workflow. There's only one of these, and there's only one error trigger. So anytime I'm building an automation anywhere else inside of N8N, you're gonna come to your settings and you're gonna make sure that error workflow is selected. You've selected that workflow. That way it triggers it when the automation shoots an error. All right, so let's build a new workflow now. I'm gonna build one that auto posts to my Twitter every day at a certain time. So let's go ahead and start with a schedule. This is gonna happen every day. Now there's a couple different ways to set up this schedule. Trigger interval days, or I can do custom. If I want it to be every day at 9 a.m. Eastern time, it's pretty easy to set it with like these defaults, 9 a.m., trigger at minute, but maybe I want it to trigger like every 3 hours. That's not something you can really easily set up with these. So for that, you would do custom cron. And using the custom cron, you can set about just to any schedule or interval that you want. And to generate what that code is gonna be, you're gonna be using your ChatGPT. But for this purpose, I'm just gonna do it every day at 8 a.m. And of course here I can set additional rules to trigger on more days. So you can set up multiple cron jobs if you want. We're gonna go ahead and execute that step and then grab that test data. Now it's ready to go. So what I want this to do is every day at 8 a.m., I want the AI agent to use Perplexity to do some internet research and find a trending topic in AI automation and then write me a tweet. So let's go ahead and add AI agent. Now we're gonna define below, these are the parameters. Now in this case, I don't really have anything from here that I want to put into this prompt. It's gonna be an original prompt every day. So let's go ahead and just configure this first. I'm gonna have the user message, the system message, In this case, I might not even need a system message because there's no variables, but just for the purposes of teaching, let's go ahead and do it. Do research and write a viral tweet about the latest news in the AI automation. So that's kind of the base prompt. That's what I want it to do. I will set a specific output format. I don't need a fallback model. Now let's create a system message. You are a social media /X/Twitter expert. Your goal is to help research trending news and social media posts about AI automation, and then write a viral tweet that will be posted directly to X. Now for the system messages, I like to give it step by step, like what I would normally do. So first, use Perplexity tool to research trending news articles and social media posts to see what people are excited about AI automation today. Use that research to write a viral tweet following best practices for creating, best practices for getting shares on X. So that's kind of the process. Then you want to give it some rules, some parameters that you want it to follow every time. And this is really where you're accounting for AI going nuts. So the better that you get at using AI and knowing where it falls short, the better you're able to prevent it from falling short by giving it strict rules. So 1, never use words or phrases commonly used by AI model. Write in the tone of Alex Hormozy. Never output sources. Always output in plain text. Never go past the character limit. Output only the tweet with no explanation or additional words or characters. So that's a pretty solid prompt. One thing I don't like is that I have to scroll to see the whole prompt. So if I want to make it bigger, I can either click and drag, or I can go into expression and make it full screen, which makes it really easy to write and kind of see what's going on in there. Now, the other thing that I want it to do is to check recent memory and make sure you are not writing tweets about the same subject. Because it's doing research, maybe something's hot for a whole week. I don't want it using that same idea more than once. So cool, that gives us some good prompts. Now we can go ahead and assign a chat model. So I like to use Claude anytime that I am doing copywriting. It just seems to do the best job. So I'm going to go to Open Router. I'm going to go to Sonnet 4, and I like to actually title it to the model that I'm using. Now in this case, I want a sampling temperature that's pretty high, around 0.7. Now this is the model that's powering the agent. It's going to make sure that it's following instructions, and it's also going to be responsible for the copy and the output. Next, I want to give it a memory. I can either do simple memory or my Postgres chat memory that I typically use. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to do a simple memory since it's much easier for most people to set up, and that's what you should use if you're just getting started. So the key, I'm just going to do LGJX because it remembers, okay, these are LGJX tweets. It's going to access that memory for each one. It's not person specific, it's workflow specific. Now I want to give it access to some tools. I want it to do research with Perplexity every day. So let's go ahead and go to Perplexity as a tool, and I want to call it just Perplexity. You want to name your tools, whatever you're calling them inside of this agent prompt. So in this case, I said use Perplexity tool. I want to make sure that it knows this is the Perplexity tool. We're going to message a model. We're going to use Sonar. I can also use Sonar Pro if we wanted to. And then I'm going to let the AI model define the search parameters here. We're going to simplify output. That just makes everything a little bit nicer. All right, so now it has access to a Perplexity tool. Now I want to add this output parser. So structured output parser. All I want is the output tweet. Maybe I want a reason for that tweet too, or what is the topic and what is the subject of research. But for this, let's just do just the tweet, and you just want to give it an example. Today, Elon Musk launched a new AI product. And this isn't really a complicated one, so I don't need an auto fixer on there. I'm going to leave it. The more stuff that you add, sometimes the longer it can take or the more room for error there is too. So just really knowing what's necessary and what's not necessary will help. I also like to name my agents. So let's just say X Research Writer, just so I can see what they do. Another little cool hack is as you're building these, maybe you want to come back to it months later, or you want to give it to somebody as a template. You can actually add a sticker. So in this top right, I can add sticky note, or I can just Shift S. And now I have a sticky note that is in markdown format. So I can just, this is an H2 header because I know it's got 2 pound signs. You'll get better at markdown as you go. X, research, and post. And then I can do all bold, does research every day into recent AIA topics and writes tweets. And then close it to make sure that it's bold. And now just like that, I've got a sticky note. I put these all over the place. You'll see them all over my automations. It helps not just me, but anytime I share these automations for friends or to sell them, it helps them navigate through these automations and see what's going on. All right, so now I've got this data, and I think this one is ready to run. Let's see how it does. I'm gonna go ahead and I can either execute the entire workflow, or I can just execute this one step. So let's go ahead and execute that step and watch as the AI agent actually thinks, uses its memory, does the research, and creates the output. Normally, this would have been done if I did it not in an agent, I did it in a workflow. One step, do perplexity research. Then the next step, make sure I didn't talk about that topic before by checking the knowledge base. So the agent just makes it all much more streamlined. As you can see, it checked the memory twice, it used the model twice, came into perplexity, and now I have an output. And here is that output. Now, right now it's in schema, so sometimes you can't see the whole thing, so I like to change it to JSON. So here's that final tweet. It looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and pin it. And now I've got a tweet that's ready to be posted on a daily basis. So then I would just have to come in and actually do the final step, which is really easy. We're just gonna come to X. I already signed in. Here's the things that I can do with X. And if your social media platform isn't listed, there's usually a workaround through some other platform that connects to the social media platforms. So as an example of that, maybe I can't post directly to Instagram from N8N natively. However, using a tool like Social Pilot, I can post to Instagram from N8N through Social Pilot. I would just have to send an API call to that application. But luckily, there is a native X integration. I built that developer account. I'm already signed in. Let's go ahead and create tweet. So we're gonna use my credentials that I just built, tweet, create. We're gonna move that text in. So you can see there's some other options here. I always check them before using a node for the first time. And I don't think I need any of this. I'm not uploading media. I'm not replying to anything. I'm not quoting anything. So let's go ahead and test it. I'm gonna hit execute, and it looks like that was successful. Let's go into my X account and see. Cool, just like that, it's right there. That worked. I can do this on autopilot, and it's a really, really effective strategy. Now, I'm not gonna do this right now. I may actually do this after this video, is actually really fine tune this. That tweet is probably not fully optimized. There's probably lots of structural things that I can do, lots of different prompts that I can put into this researcher to find the best possible topics. So although this is a simple 3-step workflow, it's really powerful. Every day at the same time, it's gonna do research, make sure it didn't post about that already, and then create a tweet that looks really good. You just wanna continue to refine your prompt and your ideas so that you're giving good information and leaving good tweets. Now I've got this pinned data in here. It's just test data. Once I name this thing, so let's say daily X is gonna be my title. And then for tags, I'm gonna do content. I'm gonna do X. That way I can really easily find this automation later on. Then I can go ahead and flip it to active. Now there's nothing else that I need to do. This is gonna run every single day on autopilot. All right, now what if I wanted to take this one step further? And instead of just relying on perplexity research to write the tweet, I actually wanted to do research on what my competitors are posting. So let's go ahead and move some stuff over, and I'm gonna see if I can get some more information. So let's use X again. All right, so I can use search tweets to actually see what people are tweeting about. So let's say AI automation is my search term. Or better yet, let's use N8N. Let's see what people are posting about for N8N. And I can limit how many I want to actually pull, because I'm gonna have to go through that data. So let's limit it to 50 after, oh cool, I can do after a specific date range. So I can do this either fixed, where I am picking a date, or maybe I want it to be flexible. So within the last 3 months, I would change the after to an expression. And then let's bring this timestamp into the expression. This would be after today's date. Let's go ahead and bring that into our assistant and say, create the code for this date minus 1 week. So I'm only looking for posts within the last week. And it's gonna go ahead and give me the code for me to just copy and paste. And now I'm only pulling content within the last week. So let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. All right, looks like X might be hitting some limits. So instead of using X to search tweets, which I wouldn't usually do anyway, I would actually do something called scraping them. This is like calling an external software to go and get some data for me. Let's actually talk about adding scraping to this workflow. So if you want to add scraping, there's only one tool you need to know. It's called Appify. I have a massive discount for this, by the way. It's inside of my vault. That's vault.leadgenj.com. You can get this as part of my AI Automation Insider. So you need to go and join that school community. As you can see, you can get 30% off on Appify. And I use the crap out of this. So if I wanted to find tweets, let's go ahead and search X Twitter scraper. and it's actually really cheap to use. All right, so let me give you a quick walkthrough of what Apify is and how it can really supercharge your skills inside of N8N. So a lot of times you're gonna want access to outside data, whether that be research or scraping social media, scraping leads. To do any of those things where you automatically go out and get information by scraping the web or scraping a social media platform, which is really useful in a lot of cases, you're gonna need to call upon one of these scrapers. So as you can see, you can rent these scrapers that other people have already built and other people maintain. You don't need to learn how to code. All you need to learn how to do is access the tools available to you. And then you can just search for whatever your use case is. And as you can see, there's MCP servers in here. There's a lot of stuff that you can plug in to your automations to really supercharge them. Travel, video, automation. There's a lot of cool stuff that people have built that you can use and rent, and it's unbelievably affordable. So let's go to social media. I'm gonna look for Twitter, because I feel like that's what most of them have inside of their name at this point. And then there's a couple things that I want you to look at when you're evaluating these. You're gonna evaluate stars, users, and pricing model. Those are the big things that are going to vary. Now, I'm gonna give you another cheat code. Are you ready for this? If you're looking for the best Apify actor for a specific use case, what I want you to do is go to Perplexity and you're gonna ask it, what is the best Apify actor for rating and price for scraping recent X Twitter post for a search term? And it's actually going to go and do research on Apify and compare the cost and make sure that it can do what I asked it to do. And just like that, it gives us the best one to use. So Twitter X tweets scraper by ScrapeBadger. I'm going to copy that, come back into my Apify store, and just go ahead and paste that. And then we're looking for ScrapeBadger. And it looks like this one on the left is the one that we want. It's got 5 stars, 80 users. That's a great sign. It's unbelievably cheap. So now that we've identified that this is the one that we want, it's 20 cents per 1,000 tweets scraped. That's insanely cheap, especially considering we get 30% off. Now, the first thing that you're gonna do when you're configuring these scrapers is to do it natively inside of Apify. You wanna test it and make sure that it works before bringing it inside of N8N. If you're ever confused about what these mean, you can come into information and it'll typically help walk you through it. So it looks like I'm gonna wanna use advanced search because then I can actually give it a search query and see what it comes back with. Instead of giving it like a profile URL, which it's gonna be looking for like an ID, I wanna search with the search query. So let's come back into input. We're gonna change that to advanced search. We're not gonna give it an ID. We're not gonna give it tweets here because we're using the search. So we're gonna say N8N, and I'm looking for the tweets, and I want the last 50 of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that here. Now, some of these are gonna be rental, meaning you have to pay like 20 bucks a month in order to use it. And you can actually get free trials on most of the rentals, and you can rent it before you actually run it. You wanna avoid that if you can, but sometimes you can't avoid using a rental. So let's go ahead and hit start and see if this thing actually works. So once I hit start, it's gonna come into the run, and I can actually watch it do its thing and start scraping. It's already fetching tweets. Green is always good. So awesome. This errored out, it retried, it's now working. It looks like it's doing a really awesome job, and I've got outputs showing up in here. So my search parameters are good. This is doing what I wanted it to do. That's awesome news. The other thing that you should see within this search, so right now I'm in the view of looking at the scraper. Once I come into runs, this is how many runs it's doing, and then I can come into each individual run, see how it's doing, and then under storage, there's a very important value called dataset ID. This is what it uses to pull the data. So remember, you're running the scrape and then getting the data from the scrape in 2 distinct steps. So now that I've got a proven method and I know that it works, I can actually just check what that JSON is here. And this is what I'm gonna bring into N8N. So now every day at 9 a.m., let's go ahead and delete that and then add an Apify trigger. Now this is actually a community node that I installed. If you type in Apify, it should pop right up. Then you wanna run the actor, and then you wanna get dataset items. Now, those are 2 distinct steps, but there is a way to run it and get the dataset items all in one go. So if you wanted to do it natively in Apify, you can just run the actor. You'll choose the actor from the list that we just ran. We'll paste that JSON in there. So let's copy that JSON. And if you did want to like change the search term based on the trigger, you can just do that. So every time you run the actor, it's a different search term. And then you can wait for finish. That way, the next step won't start until this is done. But even so, I still like to add like a 15-second wait just in case. And then from Apify, we can get the result. We'll add another Apify. We're gonna get dataset items. So let's go ahead and run this one. I'm going to go ahead and run it all the way to wait. If I click on wait, it's gonna run all the steps before it. Now it's running the actor. And as you can see, it's currently running. Based on what we just saw, it should finish pretty quickly in about 20 seconds. So quick tip here when using Apify, if this is a really short duration, then you never need to split it up. You can do back to back, just like this, run, wait a few seconds, get the dataset items. However, if it takes 5, 10, 20 minutes, which can be the case in sometimes, then you're gonna wanna set up a workaround, such as using a webhook. So if I come into integrations, HTTP webhook, when run is succeeded, when it's done, it'll send the run data to that webhook URL. That way you can have Apify notifying your automation once it's completed. Luckily in this case, it only takes just a few seconds. So we're gonna go ahead and just do it in the same shot. Now, like I said, that dataset ID is the most important piece of data that we have. Now, like I said, that dataset ID from Apify is the piece of code that we need. So from run an actor, it gives us that dataset ID that it used. So when I'm getting the items, you wanna use that same dataset. So let's go ahead and pin this data since I don't wanna keep running this thing over and over again. So let's go ahead and get those dataset items. And just like that, we got all 50 tweets. Now for really short runs like this, there's actually a method that I like even better because this takes 3 steps. Why would I do this in 3 steps if I can do it in 1? So let me show you how to do it in 1. We're gonna add another trigger. I'm just gonna trigger this thing manually, and I'm gonna run an HTTP request. This is gonna be a custom request to Apify to start scraping. So you might be saying, Jay, is it really easier? Why do you have to do an API call? It's easier just to use the 3 nodes. Well, I'm gonna show you just how easy this is. N8N gives you a lot of predefined credentials, so I don't need to keep inputting my API keys and stuff for Apify every time that I want to talk to it. I just have to input these predefined credentials that I already have because I'm already signed in, and then that makes doing the API request a lot easier. So let's come back into this actor, and let's actually go into API endpoints. And there's one endpoint that I absolutely love, but it's important maybe just to go through some of the other ones and see what your options are. But typically when I'm using an API call, it's this one. Run actor synchronously and get dataset items. It's gonna start it, run it till it's done, and then just output the finished product at the end. So all I have to do is copy that endpoint right there. So here's how to set up this API call. It's gonna be a post, because remember it says that right here, post, and then you're gonna input that URL that you just copied. Apify already gives you your API token. And then just like you did running this actor here, you're gonna grab that JSON that you already used, and you're gonna send it as JSON in the body. And this tells the actor exactly what data to use. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this run x scraper results. Now let's see if this works. I'm gonna go ahead and execute that workflow. It's gonna trigger, it's gonna run that scraper, and let's go in and see if it's working. Awesome, it is running. Let's make sure that the input data is correct. So I can come in and see, okay, cool. It inputted the data correctly, it's running, there's no errors. And this is gonna keep running until it's finished and has those data set items. Now this only works, and I only use this when it takes about less than a minute for an actor to finish. And in this case, it's only just a few seconds. So just like that, I did what I did in these 3 steps in a single step. And that took me way less time than the 3 of these. And there's less room for error. So remember, the less steps that you have, the more that you're able to make it concise, the less things that can go wrong. So now we have these 50 items. So what the hell do we do with these 50 items? Well, first let's see what we're working with. So I'm gonna come into these 50 items. I can come into schema, and this is all actually a single item. So we're actually getting a ton of information from this thing. If I come into JSON, I can actually flip through the different runs. So this is like 1 out of 50, 2 out of 50, 3 out of 50, and see what kind of stuff we have here. Now I can't just throw all 50 of those into this research writer because it's gonna cycle through 50 times, write 50 different tweets. Instead, I wanna go through these and figure out which ones are actually good tweets that are usable for me. So what I would typically do is do like a qualifying agent here. So I'm gonna do another AI step. This one's only goal is to see if it's a good tweet for me to write about. So for the prompt, this is the user message. So tweet, account, engagement, and then we're gonna come into expression and just click and drag things. Account, tweet, oh cool, I've got replies, I've got favorites. So I can give it all that information and it can help me decide which ones are the best. So system message, decide if the tweet is a good one for me to write. Tweet about if I talk about AI, automation, be strict, classification and qualification. Output only, yes or no. Output an explanation. So I just want to go through it and classify it. Normally I would probably be a lot more robust with this prompt, and then I'm going to require specific output format because remember, I really want this only to be yes or no. qualification, yes, explanation. And we don't want this as an array, we can set up a format auto fixer because format is very important for this one. I'm just going to use GPT 4.1 mini for the structural output fixer. But now we've got a problem. I'm actually glad I caught this because before I ran this, if I ran it right now, it would send all 50 to this AI agent at once, which we do not want to do. So instead we need to add a looper. We need to loop them over one at a time. And then we can run these next steps. So I'm going to pin this one. Once we've got the outputs, we're going to run that loop. Cool. It looped one through. Now let's go ahead. I have to add a chat model, of course. So let's do open router, and we're going to use a nice cheap reasoning model. So let's go ahead and play this one. And it's going to get that first tweet, and it's going to analyze it, and it's going to give me an output. Not a good tweet. This tweet focuses on SEO automation using N8N to generate revenue with keyword research. It is specific to SEO tasks. So okay, I kind of like that output. And now I can run a filter and decide whether or not I want to keep that output and use it to write a tweet. Because remember, I have no and I have an explanation. So now, just like we learned earlier, if qualification is equal to yes, then continue and write the tweet. And if not, just keep looping. And now if true, I can go ahead and write that tweet and post it to X. Granted, this is not a production-ready automation, but now you kind of get the idea of how I'm thinking about using these more advanced tools, scraping, AI agents, and this lets you build much more complex automations to solve a lot more complex problems. And while we're on scraping, let me show you one other little hack from inside of Apify. Instead of running that scraper on a schedule here, where you're getting the schedule, running the actor, waiting, getting the results, what if the scraper takes a while? What if it's 20 or 30 minutes? Well, there's actually a much better way to do it, and that's by doing save tasks and schedules. That way, Apify controls the schedule, and you don't get notified until that actor is done and successful, typically via a webhook. So when will I use either? Scheduling in Apify versus scheduling in N8N? Well, I'm pretty much exclusively using the Apify schedules unless I need to feed unique parameters into the actor each time. So what do I mean by unique parameters? Obviously, this one is triggered by a form submission. However, when I'm running this TikTok scraper from the form submission, I need to map the form submission details onto that JSON. And you can't do that by using the Apify schedules. So if I'm scheduling, just like do research on the last 50 tweets for this keyword, and that keyword's not going to change, you do it in Apify. You build the schedule in Apify, and that way your automation just starts when it gets the webhook. Really hope I didn't confuse you there. If I did, I'm sorry. Hopefully that scraping superpower helps you take N8N to the next level. Now there's two more things that I want to walk you through that are going to help you get the most out of N8N. So this next technique is called databasing. A lot of times, especially when you're working with large data sets or 100 runs, 200 runs, and you're scraping social media or you're scraping website links or URLs or posts, a lot of times you're going to get repeats. You're going to get the same data coming again and again and again. And you want to be able to filter that data out. So to do that, we do something called databasing. And you can use a lot of different tools to get this done. My recommendation is if you're going to look at this database, then use Airtable. If you're not going to look at it and you're only going to use it for the purposes of not sending redundant data through your workflow, then use Supabase. So Supabase is completely free. If you go to supabase.com, you will be able to create an account and start creating tables within Supabase. And this platform is useful for a couple of reasons. The first is it's really great just for storing data that you're not going to really use, but if you need to check it at some point, it's all here. And they have really great APIs. Their API limits are sky high and you're probably not going to hit them. Versus if you're using Google Sheets to ping all the time and check against the database and look for data, you're going to run into API limits really quickly. So each automation that I build that has to scrape and go through lots of data where I don't want to repeat data, I build a table to go along with it. So this one's core results from a core scraper. And we set it up just like a spreadsheet. It's just like a normal spreadsheet. The difference is the API limits are much higher. And we can also use a lot of this stuff for knowledge basing too. Because if you remember from earlier, Supabase was the main platform that we were using for knowledge base. In fact, this is actually my main knowledge base, this documents tab. So how does databasing work? Well, essentially, once we have a data set of like 50 or so, it's going to run through that data set and it's going to look for rows inside of Supabase. Now remember to always output data so it finds it. If it does not find it, it's going to continue and actually use my AI steps, consume AI credits to process that data and push it through. And somewhere in this step, it should add that record to the database so that it doesn't do it again. So after this one qualifies it, whether it's qualified or not, it then goes into the database so that if it does come through again, this does fire and it goes this way instead of this way and does not consume my API credits. Now again, you can use any software for databasing, Notion, Airtable, Google Sheets. It all works just fine. You can take your pick. Just understand that API limits are real, and if you're using Google Sheets, you'll likely hit those API limits. Now I want to briefly walk you through knowledge bases, how to configure a knowledge base, how to plug it into your AI agents, and how to continue to populate it with data. Well, there's the easy way and there's the hard way. I'm going to go through both right now, just in case you don't feel like getting technical at all. I'm going to open up my chat with knowledge base automation. And this one essentially just plugs into my Notion. So it's just searching through some of these Notion pages for answers. The AI agent is telling it exactly what to use for the answer. You can do the same thing with Airtable, with Notion, with Google Sheets. The AI agent essentially uses them as tools and goes through those spreadsheets to look for matching data, and then it ranks it. It's not the greatest and cleanest knowledge base of all time, but it does work quite well and almost always gives the right response. Now let's take a look at what a real vector knowledge base looks like. This is Supabase, and this is my configured knowledge base. It's this Documents tab. Well, we've got the content. This is like the raw text that I've added to this knowledge base. And then we've got metadata. Metadata is stuff like this file title. So I can search by this metadata to find only these cold email replies. And then the embedding vectors is what makes it a vector knowledge base. It is a three-dimensional way that it categorizes and retrieves information that is a lot more accurate than like searching a Notion or a spreadsheet. And that's all that you need to know about that. Now, the first thing you're going to need to do, sign up for a free Supabase account. And then linked down below is going to be instructions to actually configure your Supabase knowledge base, because you do need to set some things up. And just like configuring your Google APIs inside of N8N, this is something that you only have to do once, so I'm not going to walk through it in this video. However, just like whenever you get stuck, simple instructions to set up Supabase vector knowledge base for N8N. You'll see videos, you'll see step-by-steps, and you only have to do it the one time. And once it's configured, it's gonna look like this, obviously empty, so that you can start populating data and then accessing data from that knowledge base. And then here's all the ways that you can get data into that vector knowledge base once it's configured. It really doesn't matter what the trigger is. There's a couple things that you can do. You can set up a Google Drive account, and then it watches for new uploads to that Drive account, downloads and extracts the file, cleans it up for the knowledge base, and then puts it into that vector store. You can do it from a sheet, and then it just loops over rows in the sheet, puts it into your vector knowledge base. You can do it from your Notion. There's a lot of ways to get data into the knowledge bases, what I'm getting at. So let's go ahead and set one up. So I'm going to go ahead and do a manual trigger, because if you're trying to populate this knowledge base for the first time, there's a few things that you're going to need to know once it's configured. First thing is, where are you getting the data from? I recommend only feeding it text data and not feeding it too much. Be really selective with what you're putting inside of your Supabase, because as it's searching for keywords, it's searching for phrases. And if there's a lot of overlap and conflicting information, it's not going to give you the best result. So I actually built this folder inside of my Google Drive titled RAG Knowledge. RAG is just Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's a fancy word for vector knowledge base. And I'm essentially putting documents inside of this. This is human JNotes. It's just text and copy that's going to go inside of my knowledge base. It's just information about me. Now let's actually train it on maybe a bio of me. That's going to be relatively accurate. So I'm going to go new document. We're going to grab my bio, JBio, and I want to move this into that RAG knowledge. So I'm going to put it in there and then come back to that automation where it's looking at that Drive folder. So instead of triggering this, I'm just going to go ahead and trigger it from that. Triggers on changes involving a specific folder. So I found what I want. It's going to poll every minute. So Drive isn't sending it signals. It's actually pinging Drive every minute. Trigger on changes involving a specific folder. Yes. We want it to monitor the RAG folder. Watch for, just say file updated. I can do file type all, but really I'm only interested in Google Docs. So let's go ahead and fetch a test event and see if it can find that recent one that I just. Go ahead and collapse some of these things so I can see more information. Cool, JBio. So I've got the information from there. Now I need to get the text out of that document. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in Drive. I want to download the file. And then I can just, instead of from list, which I can like select things, but obviously this is going to be more dynamic. So I want the file ID. Let's go ahead and see if I can find it in the results here. There it is. And then let's go ahead and execute that step, see if that worked. Cool. Now I've got what we call binary data. So this is an actual file. I'm downloading the file, and now I've got it here. And I have a fourth tab, schema, table, JSON, binary. Now to turn that binary data into text, I know this is kind of stupid because it should be relatively simple. It's a Google Drive document. So why is it so difficult to access the text in there? That's just how it is sometimes. You're gonna get used to it. So access text from file. We're going to extract from text file, because remember that's a Google Doc. You just wanna call it whatever that latest one is. It's almost always most recently called data. We're gonna execute step. And now we've got the binary data from that run. There's also lots of other ways to send information into this thing. You can do it manually with a form, you can do it with a chat. If you've got it already in a different knowledge base like a Google Sheet or an Airtable, you can go through each rows. And just going back, because I missed an important step, if you miss one step, the whole thing goes to crap. So in this download file, I actually want to make sure I'm converting that file to the right format. So this is Google Docs, we want it to be a TXT, not HTML. That's why we're getting the weird stuff. So then we still get this data file extension TXT, and when we extract the data, now it looks like this, which is what we want. Now, how do I get the data from this input? Because now we've got the text that we want to put into our knowledge base. Awesome. This is the format we want it in. What we need to do is add an additional step. So let's go to Supabase, not Supabase, but the vector store. We want to add documents to the vector store. Insert documents from list. You want to select the one that you've configured. Usually it's going to be the documents tab. The embedding batch size is how big each of these contexts is. Typically I leave it as is, the 200, and then you'll leave this as is. Now you need two additional things to add. We're going to add an embedding. So this is actually using OpenAI. We're going to use OpenAI pretty much every time for this, embedding 3 small, and we can, for the most part, leave these options off. Now the document loader, we're going to use the default data loader, and here's where it gets really important. Metadata. This is how you can be more targeted when you're searching your knowledge base down the road. So maybe I only want to search for like lead gen J personal information. I can title it, title LGJ personal. That way, if I'm ever searching that knowledge base in the future, I can search the title metadata for LGJ personal. The rest of it, we're going to leave as is, simple text splitting, load all input data, or I can set it to load specific data and just put that in. But in this case, all the input data is the correct data. So let's go ahead and run this thing and actually put it inside of my knowledge base. I can either pin these or I can just run the whole thing again. And just like that, it's now embedded and inside of my knowledge base. Let's go ahead and refresh, make sure it's here. Boom, there it is. There's my bio inside of my knowledge base. And now I can access it later on. Now let's save this and let's go to a much more complex automation. My appointment setting reply system. So you can see I've used stickers to really label the different ways that this goes, but this uses my knowledge base. It's essentially an appointment setter. It knows how to respond to different inquiries. It talks to customers. It talks to leads. So when I'm setting this thing up, we want to give it access to that Supabase vector store. And here you can see I set the limit to 20. So anytime you're giving it access to the Supabase knowledge base, you're going to select the Supabase vector store. You're going to select the document that you want to search. So table name, documents. Now, normally you don't want to give it a limit of 20. Normally you want to give it a limit of like 3 to 5. That's how many results it's going to pull from the vector store that match. However, if you're using a re-ranker, the Cohere re-ranker, it's actually going to go through all 20 and then find the 3 best. So it's an extra layer of protection to get you an even better result. And the Cohere re-ranker is unbelievably affordable. You can just go to cohere.com and sign up and get an API key. So you can see I'm barely spending any money using this, and it does improve the results quite a bit. So you want to include metadata. Now I know that when I put information into my knowledge base, that documents tab, I gave it this file title, LGJ cold email replies, knowledge base. That way it's only searching through that data. It's not looking through my personal data because that's not important for this specific agent to be able to give a response. All it needs is this targeted bit of information. So you want to make sure to add that metadata filter with the correct file title and the correct result. And anytime you don't know what that is, you can come in here and find it pretty easily. So let's go to metadata of one that I know comes from there, and I can see file title, and I can see the title listed right there. So it's only going to pull results that have that metadata. So let's see what this actually looks like in practice. So this is a recent run that we had, lasted 45 seconds. Now, if you come into any of these and you want to like diagnose it and see what it's doing, I'm going to open this up and you can come to logs and see every step this agent is taking. So it's pulling the input. It's got 1 output, 2 output, 3 outputs. The re-ranker is working through all of them to find the very best. It's using Perplexity to do research. And finally, it's giving that output. So you can see it actually pinging all of this stuff and then outputting exactly what I want. So now there's something I've been hesitant to teach you because I don't want you to rely on this as a crutch. But the ability to import automations into your N8N is really uncanny, or the ability for one of these AI models to actually generate the exact code that you can import into your N8N usually can get you 70 to 80% of the way there. So some places to start, one, inside of my community or other people who are teaching AI automation will typically give you the files that you can upload in to your account, link your credentials, and have a mostly working version. The problem with that is sometimes it takes longer to fix it, go through their prompts, replace it with softwares that you use. It'll take longer to do that than to just build it yourself. And you get better at building when you do it yourself. But as you're getting started, you can go ahead and hit on this templates button, or just come to N8N and come into templates. And you can go through a lot of these community templates where they've already achieved a lot of the stuff that you're probably looking to achieve. Sales, marketing, support, ops. And you can come in and you can see exactly how their workflows work. They're typically labeled. You can click to explore. And what's really cool is because they're here in N8N, if I want to use any of these, I can just import the template into my self-hosted N8N, and then I just select the credentials that I want, and it'll automatically put it into my account with the correct credentials. So all I have to do is go through this thing and make changes. I never use community templates. I'm always building from scratch. Now, what I will do is follow a lot of people in these communities, in the AI automation space. There's going to be some people I recommend listed down below that I definitely recommend that you start following on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and seeing what workarounds, what softwares, what flows that they're coming up with to solve unique problems. Because once you see what they're using to solve a specific problem or specific workarounds, it opens your mind to say, oh, wow, I can connect that to that, or take these steps to get around that issue that keeps happening. And that's how you get better, and that's how you improve your skills. So that community node is there for you. And you can also use AI to help design these automations and workflows for you. Now, I'm not gonna show you how to do that. ChatGPT, Claude, they can all do it. You just tell them what workflow you want, what you're trying to accomplish, and it'll get you 70 to 80% of the way there. However, I really don't want you relying on those as a crutch. You should be in there figuring it out and just getting ideas from other people, but not really copying their entire workflows. The power of this is because every business is unique. Your use cases are unique, and I guarantee that the workflows that I create, you're gonna have your own flair or spin that you wanna put on them that's unique to you. Now that you've learned the skills, let's put them to work. This is where the real learning happens. We're gonna do a live build together, and we're gonna build two things. One, we're going to build a much more complex workflow like this. I find myself building workflows very similar to this all the time for social media, for lead generation, and for sales. So I think working through one of these is going to help you master a couple of skills: scraping, complex flows like looping, databasing, and then building AI agents. So this is a lot of skills that you just learned all combined into one, and it's something that I find myself building pretty frequently. And then the other thing that we're going to be doing and starting with is something a lot more simple. So this is a really old automation that I have in Zapier, and it's super outdated. It keeps failing. I keep having to update my models. So I'm actually going to be moving this into N8N. And I think this is going to be helpful for you for a couple of reasons. The first is that you probably already have some sort of automation somewhere, maybe, and you might need to translate that automation into the new N8N language and being able to take something that's old and build it better to actually improve on an old automation. So I'm going to show you how I think about it as I'm transferring this into N8N. And the automation that we're going to be building, the more complex one, I kind of already spec'd it out. So this is what I'm expecting to build. And the reason we're not just rebuilding this Instagram auto commenter is I already built it. I don't need to build it again. I'm actually running businesses, and I want to build something that's actually useful for me. So this is what we're going to build. It's going to have all of the same principles and learnings that we already mastered, but I'm going to build something that I actually need. And you're just going to follow along with me to see my thought processes, to see how it all works step by step. So what I expect to build is this is going to trigger once a day. It's going to scrape comments from specific LinkedIn accounts that I'm targeting, or maybe keywords I haven't decided yet. It's going to loop through those results and check if I already messaged that person, because it's just going to be looking for LinkedIn accounts that are commenting on posts about AI automation and lead generation. And I don't want to keep going over those same accounts over and over again. So it's going to check the database. It's going to see if that's a good account to reach out to. If so, it's going to find their email, generate some personalized outreach to them, and then add them to a LinkedIn automation and to a cold email automation. And this old Zapier automation that we're moving, again, I'm running an actual business. I'm doing this because I need to do it. It's going to be helpful for my business. And it's also going to be really helpful for you because this is a really standard workflow that every business should have. It's essentially an onboarding workflow. When someone submits an intake form on my CRM, Go High Level, it's going to trigger this webhook, add it to a spreadsheet, and then based on if they gave me an address, if they want a gift, it's going to basically find their address, validate it, and then write them a custom card that's actually going to be handwritten and fully custom. And then it's going to send that card using handwritten, and then potentially send them a physical gift using this webhook in Sendle. If they're in the US and if they gave me a valid address, then we're going to send them an actual gift. Now, if that all sounds good to you, let's jump right in and start by cloning this Zapier automation. We're going to start with this one because it's a little bit easier. There's no complex data flows. We're not going to have to build really complex AI agents, but it's still going to incorporate some really important skills. So the first thing that we need to do is capture a webhook in N8N when somebody submits that form from Go High Level. So let's just start. I'm going to open up N8N here. And I'm also going to need to open up my Go High Level. Now, I already have a workflow built because something is triggering this Zapier automation. So first I need to find my intake automation. Course intake, send card, course intake webhook. Let's do course intake webhook. This is probably it. And I haven't updated this since August of 24. So let's just go ahead and add an additional webhook here. And then we're going to need to put a URL in that webhook. Now let's go into my N8N. I'm going to go to create workflow. And I'm going to add a first step, which is going to be a webhook trigger. Now, I already know that this is capturing a post webhook call because it's sending that data from Go High Level. So now I'm going to have this test URL that we're going to trigger. And when I'm naming these, I actually just like to name them at the same time. So let's call this one course intake Go High Level send gift. And then we're just going to copy that, and I'm going to put it into this webhook call inside of Go High Level. Now, another thing I like to do, because once I do make this production, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to grab the production URL as well. Because I know once I switch this to live, I may forget that step, so I may as well do it now. So now anytime this automation fires, it's going to hit that test URL, and it's going to hit the live URL. All right, now let's go ahead and trigger this webhook. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to say listen for test event, and then let's trigger a test event. I'm just going to add myself into this workflow. Probably at some point I filled out an intake form. So I just ran myself through there. It's going to trigger all three of these webhooks. And now I should have some test data that's showing up. First thing I always like to do once I have test data in my trigger node is pin that data. That way I can use it for all of my follow-up tests. Now, okay, the next two things in this workflow is add to Google Sheets and update contact in GHL. I actually don't know why it's doing that. It might be because I used to do the intake with Jotform, but I actually can skip both of these steps. The reason for that is, let's come back into my other workflows. I'm going to come into intake, and I can consolidate this too. I'm actually not sure why there's two different automations with these different steps. This is actually probably a little bit lazy. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this node. Part of getting good at building automations is making them as simple as possible. You want to be able to get something done in as few steps as possible because that leaves less room for error. So the send card, we're just going to go ahead and put it inside of this webhook. So I'm just going to consolidate these, the course intake send card and course intake webhook. I'm going to paste that notification here and hit save. And now I can delete this old automation. I'm just going to turn it off and hit save. Now, the other thing that I can do to simplify this is I could actually do this create spreadsheet row right inside of Go High Level, since they do have several integrations. So I could just add to sheet here. Now, I'm not going to for the purposes of learning, but it's a good helpful hint to note that if you can do something inside of GHL or somewhere with a native integration, go ahead and do it, because if you can consolidate steps, that's going to make your life a lot easier. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this one on and come back to N8N and start building. So we don't need to do this add update contact in GHL. They filled out the form in GHL, so it's already updated. But let's go ahead and do this Google Sheet. So Lead Gen J course members intake. That's the worksheet that I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and add another node. We're going to find Google Sheets, and we're going to append row in a sheet. Now I need to go ahead and find that sheet. So I'm going to come into document list. But you got to make sure your credentials are connected. If you don't already have a Google credential connected and they're using the community version, you need to probably go and watch the video on how to connect to Google, because it can be a little bit tricky. In fact, if you come in to create new credential, they've got a documentation that you can go through that'll walk you through connecting Google for the first time. All right, so I want to find that list, course members. This is going to be the intake tab on that sheet, and then it's going to open up all of the columns. If at any point you have new columns, you need to remap them, all you have to do is come and hit this and say refresh columns list. All right, now let's go ahead and map these fields. I like to do it in schema just since it's a little bit easier to find the data. I'm going to get rid of headers. Submission date, a lot of times the date's all the way at the bottom. And as you can see, if I come down, I've got all of these different date fields. I can do now, today. Now, I kind of like using now. I can also modify this if I wanted to change the format of this date, because I don't really like this big, ugly format. So let's go ahead, open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to my little ChatGPT handy dandy assistant. And I'm going to say format this JSON, so output date is, we're going to do month, month, day, day, year, 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 and then time in AM, PM. And then you just give it the node. And like I said, I don't know how to code, so it's just going to kind of give me the code. And most of the time it works. We just have to make sure that it works. So if I come back to that automation and I paste the code that it just gave me, now I'm getting this beautiful date and time result. All right, now let's keep mapping. We need the full name, email, phone number. Let's just click and drag name, email, phone. Remember, this is test data, so it's probably not all going to be here in this case, but the fields should all be here. Industry, revenue. Now, if you don't know what you're looking for, like why did you decide to join? I actually don't know what that field is. You can go into your Go High Level form, see the input, or you can just scroll until you find it. Let's see, say reason, course purchase reason, I think is it. All right, so now I've gone ahead and mapped all those fields inside of Google Sheets. I always like to check the options to see, just to make sure I'm doing everything right and not missing anything. I also like to change the title of these nodes just to make it a little bit easier for me. And if I do ever decide to share them with somebody, it's nice to have them titled. So let's say add to sheets. Okay, we've got that set up. Let's go ahead and test that one. So I'm just gonna run that single node. Cool, it looks like that went through. I'm gonna go ahead and pin that data as I just kind of work through and test my new flow. All right, the next thing I have to do is see if that person wants me to send them a gift or not. So on my intake form, let's go ahead and find my intake form. By the way, we send really cool gifts. So if you do sign up and you're in the US, you're gonna get a cool headband, a bunch of swag. I love to get my insiders outfitted with some awesome stuff. So yes, I would give you my address, your shipping address. This is kind of the flow. Industry, current monthly revenue, reason you joined. Okay, so if they selected yes, I will give you my address. Then we want to proceed with the rest of this automation. So this is like an if-then statement. So I'm going to go ahead and add an if node. And then may I ship you a welcome gift? Now in this case, this is actually a good learning experience because the test data that I sent through actually doesn't have the info that I need. So there's a couple things that I can do here. I can send new test data through with somebody who actually filled this out. Now instead of sending new test data through, I'm actually going to go ahead and manually enter this test data. So yes, I will give you my address. I'm just going to put that here. It needs to be valid JSON. And that way I don't need to send test data through. I can just do this. I can also add a valid shipping address. So let's actually I'm going to add my old address. All right, so now I've got this data that I need in order to proceed. So let's come back to this if node. And now in this if node, I need to pull data from that first step. I could pull it from here, but I actually like pulling it from like the source data. So how it's going to work is if send me address contains yes, then proceed. If it doesn't contain yes, then don't proceed. So we're going to go and grab that from webhooks, see if I can search gift to save myself some time. May I ship you, can I send you a gift? Yes. Now I've got the test data that I need. Now when you're using these filters, you got to make sure that you choose the right thing. It's going to highlight the string because this is a string. This is all different forms of JSON. A string is like a sentence or words and letters all combined. And you can tell because of how the JSON is presented. Anything with quotes around it is considered a string. And then if it has like true or false without quotes, that's Boolean. And if it has just numbers, then of course it's number. So this is a string. I want to say string contains yes. If gift equals yes, then continue. And if it doesn't equal yes, it's going to go under the no. The big difference between if and switch nodes is that if is just true or false. Is it yes? Cool, true. If no, false. Whereas switch, you can set a lot of different parameters and tell it to go different directions, 4, 5, 6 different directions. If is just yes or no, true or false. So just to make sure I set that up correctly, let's go ahead and run that if node. And it actually doesn't like that sheets is pinned. So I can either unpin this and then run the whole thing, which is going to add it to sheets over and over and over again, or I can just deactivate that node while I test the next step. So in this case, deactivating the node is actually better for testing. Good, lots of mistakes. It went to false. Mistakes are good. This is how we learn. So because I deactivated that node, now this webhook parameter actually changed. So I'm gonna unpin sheets, test it again, still false. It does contain yes. So why is it going under false? Let's see if it's an issue with Google Sheets here. We're gonna execute the whole thing now. Awesome, so that was the issue. Sometimes debugging can be annoying. This is why these guided builds actually help more than anything. So if you like more of these, let me know and I can do more of these guided builds. So now we got the true false to work. Let's go ahead and pin that and move on to the next step. As you can see in Zapier, I actually used a filter step, which is another option. I could actually do a filter step. I don't usually like to because I like these true false nodes, but if I wanted to, I could add a filter instead and filter out anything where this wasn't yes, and it would just kind of stop the automation right there. It's essentially the same thing, but now I have additional options if I ever want to add to it. Now looking back at my intake form, I ask where do you live, like what continent, and I don't necessarily think I need to because I'm asking for their shipping address, but I guess it's good for me to know like what country they're coming from, so I'll keep it. So let me use that as the next filter, the where do you live. Just to show you something else that's helpful, I actually don't have a lot of the data that I needed here, including like the where do you live, that wasn't filled out by me. So let's actually run a real human through this thing. So let's come back into that go high level, and I actually don't want to trigger the Zapier again, I only want to trigger the N8N. So for now, I'm just gonna delete that webhook, because after this, we're not gonna need it again. And then let's go ahead and test this with somebody who kind of already came through. Let's use this guy, Jose, who recently signed up. Looks like he filled out the intake today. Awesome. So let's go ahead and test this workflow with Jose. Now before I run this, I want to make sure that I am in testing mode. So I'm going to go ahead and execute workflow. It's waiting for me to call that test URL. Let's come back in and let's run it. And now as you can see, it's testing the entire workflow with that new data. Let's pin it. And by the way, anytime you want to come and use old test execution data, you can just come back in here and say copy to editor, and you'll get all of the data from that run. For example, if you don't pin it, that's a good way to like repin it. You go to executions, copy to the editor, and now it's pinned again. So now that we have valid data, let's actually come in and make sure that I got all of the stuff I needed. Did anything hold you back from joining? He said NA. Guess I will give you my address. Which country are you located? That's not right because it's like a drop down. So I think it's a location, United States. That's what I want. Awesome. Now I want this address also in the international address for GIFs. And as you can see, I pasted it here, but it's not turning green like the rest. And the reason for that is this is still set to fixed. We need to make that expression. And now it's going to pull that expression in. All right, so this worked. He wants a gift. It went to the true branch. Awesome. Let's continue. The next step is to decide if it's international or in the US. So this is filtering. If it's US, and then if it is not US, it goes down that alternative path. So let's start with the US path. Now, as I'm building this, I'm trying to decide if I still need to keep the original structure of Zapier, or if I can use an AI agent to actually make it think and choose the right thing to do. And in this case, I think it's going to be best to just keep the current flow, at least for now. So I'm going to go ahead and use a switch module. And then this one's going to be if it contains United States, and I want to find the country. So we're going to come back to webhook. We're going to find that value. And this is where I probably should have gone into my form to find the exact value, but I think it's this one. Where do you live, United States? That is the one. And I should probably go back and add this to the sheet as well. So I want to say if that contains United, then I'm going to rename this output United States. That'll help me see later what the output is called. By naming the output, now I'll be able to see, okay, that path is United States. And then let's do another routing rule. If that does not contain United States, and I'm going to write it fully out on this one because there's like United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom. So I don't want to get it confused. I should probably type it all the way out. As you're building these, you should try and account for any possible error because the more that you can account for, the less pain you're going to have down the road when things start failing. I'm going to name this node USA or international. And then I'm going to rename this output international. And let's go ahead and run that one. And it's going to run the whole thing again. Now I could deactivate the sheets. In this case, I don't really care. I can just go back into the sheet and I can delete all these entries. But I can see, cool, it went down the United States arm. So far, so good. Now this is the ugly part. This is the reason it needs to get rebuilt. This is all of my old stuff where it like used GPT 3.5 assistant to see if it was a good address and format the address correctly. Then this splitter to like split the address correctly. Then it validates the address, and only then does it actually write and send the card. So I can actually combine a lot of this into an AI agent step. So let's go ahead and turn this into an AI agent. Now this AI agent's going to need a few things. Let's configure it first. We need a prompt, we need a system message. And now I want to give it access to be able to validate an address. All right, so natively it doesn't have access to the lob tool. Let me see if it has any native integration with lob. Lob is the tool that we're already using to validate addresses. So I want to keep using it. So I'm going to go ahead and access the API documentation. And for address validation, this one's super cheap. I highly recommend using it. So let's go to API requests. I need to find their API documentation so that I can do that API call. API docs, and I'm also going to need an API code. So here, let's go to API keys. I already know that I'm going to need these things. Now you can do this one of two ways. You could give your AI agent access to an HTTP request. So you can actually add like a custom API call as a tool, or I can do it in a previous step and use another if node. I'm going to try and give my AI agent access to this tool. So, okay, let's go ahead and find validate. We need the address verification API, US verification, or international verification. All right, so let's do US verification first. Single verify. So now we've got the API documentation. This is what I need. So let's go ahead and grab that C URL. I'm going to copy that C URL into this HTTP request. We're going to import. No, it actually doesn't like it. So let's go ahead and build it from scratch. This will be fun. All right, so it doesn't like the C URL, so we're going to go ahead and build this from scratch. The first thing we're going to need is this API call URL. So let's go ahead and do a post. There's the URL. Now I think it wants the API key in the header, but I'm not actually sure. So again, I'm not a developer, so I like to use AI tools to my benefit. So let's go to single verify. I'm going to grab this and let's put it into this ChatGPT assistant. I'm going to make it model 5. Help me do the API call for this single US address verification. What is a valid C URL? To import. And this N8N assistant hopefully is going to visit that URL. So let's see if that works. Let's grab this, try and import the URL. All right, awesome. That did exactly what we wanted it to. It configured it for us. So sometimes just using that AI assistant really helps. So I'm going to call this lob US address. And you need to name your tools the correct way and then give it a description. So call this tool to verify US address. And now we're going to grab our API key and we're going to put it here. It wants my live API key. So we're going to grab publishable live environment and hopefully that works. And then for send body, it wants the primary line, the city. We're just going to let the AI agent actually fill these in because people are going to give me their addresses in all kinds of weird formats. And I want the agent to reformat things as needed. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm building is actually test before just kind of putting it into an agent and hoping that it works. So I would actually do an HTTP request just to see if this works the way that I think it's going to. So anytime you're doing an API call, sometimes you need to do some magic to actually get it to work. I'm going to leave these in here just to see if that API call actually works, and we're going to execute step. All right, in this case, it did not work. So I'm just going to take a screenshot, and it's probably delivering the header in a format that it doesn't actually like. So I'm going to copy and paste that screenshot, and I'm going to tell them this was my live publishable. All right, this is actually interesting. So it's helping me work through this. Usually the API calls have header authentication. This one has basic authentication with username and password, and it wants my secret key. Now, I probably never would have figured that out without the help of this AI assistant. So let's actually come back in, and we're going to do authentication, generic, basic auth. We're going to create a new credential, call this one lob, and then the username, it wants my secret key. So secret, live, let's go ahead and copy that and paste it in the user. Now, hopefully this works, and I don't think we need to send headers. So let's go ahead and try it now. Well, that worked, look at that. So deliverability, valid address, true, missing the unit. Okay, so we got the API call to work. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of AI's help. So now let's come into this lob address and do the same thing. We're going to do basic authentication. We're going to use lob. We're not going to send headers. I also want to add a secondary line because not every address is just a single line. This was just the template that it gave me. I also want to add the recipient, a secondary line, and a zip code. So let's do recipient. We're going to let AI define that. We're going to come back in. We're going to grab secondary line. We're going to let AI define that. So now we've got city, state, primary line, secondary line, zip code, recipient. I think that's going to be enough to validate the address. So awesome. We're going to do that one, and then I want to clone this and give it an additional tool for validating an international address. Lob international address verify. Just want to give it a description so the AI agent knows when to call this and when to use this. Let's come back in the documentation, and now we're going to find international verification. Single verify international, and it should be relatively the same. Yes, I'm just using a different call URL. The parameters look the same, except it wants a country, and they call it postal code. Instead of zip code, it's postal code. Country, postal code. All right, so now it has access to these two tools. Let's give it a chat model. This is kind of like a thinking tool, so I kind of want to give it access to OpenAI's ChatGPT. We're going to go ahead and use OpenRouter. I changed my mind. We're going to use OpenAI because I kind of want to use GPT-5, which my personal account is authorized to use. All right, now I need to come up with the prompt for this agent. So what I like to do when I'm prompting is actually just use AI as well. So help me create a prompt for an N8N AI agent that will take the intake form and address from a new customer, format the address, and then use the lob US address tool for USA address verification, or the lob international address tool for internet address verification. See example API calls below for help with formatting. And then I'm actually going to give it what the API call should look like. Then the agent should write a thank you card to the new customer based on the intake form sent. Here is an example prompt, and I'm just going to grab what I put in Zapier. So write card. Let's see what that prompt is. Oof, this is an old assistant. There's no reason for that to have ever been an assistant. So let's go ahead and come up with a new one. Actually, I can actually find what those were. So let's go to recent history, find some of those previous results. And now I've got this assistant instructions here. Perfect. Here are some previous instructions. Finally, output the following as separate fields using output parser format, full shipping address, valid status, and this is going to be true false. I'm going to call it deliverable status. And then I want the card note in plain text, JSON friendly. All right, so I'm going to use Claude to go ahead and develop this prompt. Let's see what it comes up with. So if you just tell AI the things that you want it to do, it will know the right way to present it to an AI agent so it actually does what you want instead of you just guessing and creating a prompt. Sometimes you're contradicting yourself or forget to include certain things. So this is a way that I generally like to do it. And usually it's right the first time. You can also ask it to ask you questions for things that you might be overlooking. But I'm going to go ahead and just copy this prompt and let's see how it performs. I'm going to use that on the system message. And I want to make sure it knows that it has access to these tools. So I actually said the tools here. So I want to make sure that it knows the names of these tools. Make it very clear that it's got access to these tools and to use them. Then I want to give it as much input information as I can. So let's come into the webhook. We've got that person's name. That's going to be used in the card. Why they joined, objections to joining, their business model, website, industry, and then we need their address. And that should be all I need here. Now I can actually take this one step further if I wanted to, and I can add like a perplexity tool to research their website and add some more detail. But let's go ahead and just run with that. I'm going to also do a specific output format since I do want several different results here. I want their full address. I want to know if it's deliverable, and I want to know this in a true or false format. So I know that Boolean, I'm not going to put quotes around it. And then I want their custom handwritten letter. And now I believe this is valid JSON, but if you're not sure, just use AI. It will help. And then I always like to add an auto fix formatter just in case something goes wrong. This will help fix it. This I can probably get rid of, but I'm going to leave it for now. I don't really need memory for this agent. It's now got a prompt message. It's got a system message, and I think it's going to work quite well. Now let's call this address verification and copywriting. It's going to do both. So cool. Let's go ahead and run this whole thing and see if it works. If I click play here, it's actually going to run every step until it gets here, or I can hit execute workflow here. Let's go ahead and just hit it here and see this thing run. Now what I want to see it doing is figuring out where he lives and then pinging one of those tools. So right now it is thinking of what to do, reading the prompt, reading the inputs, and I want to see it pinging this tool. It pinged the tool and it got it wrong. Now the reason it's probably getting it wrong is because I put all of those fields to let AI determine, and AI might be determining it wrong. So I might need to give it some more instruction. All right, let's see what we got. Deliverable false. It was kind of unable to fill in these blanks here, defined automatically by the model. I could add a description, but I think what the best thing for me to do might be, now instead of giving it the tool to validate the address, I'm glad I left this here. We're actually going to have it break up the address. Let's see, instead of the agent using the tools to verify the address, please have the agent split up the address into separate fields such as listed below. And then I just want all of these potential fields. This is kind of when you hit roadblocks and what you wanted to do might not be worth trying to get it to do. So you need to try and find other ways to get the same result. And there's always a way to do it. So this is actually a really good learning experience so you can see kind of how your paths tend to deviate. Especially when it comes to API calls, these can be tricky. Primary line, secondary line, city, state, country, postal code, zip code. And then I think for international, it's called like region. Let's see. Country as country code. All right, let's see if that one works. And now I need a structured output parser with all this new information. So let's have it turn it into, now create the example JSON output. Such as, and let's try this again. All right, looks like it did exactly what we wanted it to do. So now we're gonna do the API call to lob after this agent is done. So what I'm also gonna do is switch this. So I'm gonna have all of this go to the agent, and then based on what this agent outputs, it's going to go to the switcher. That way I don't have to add an additional switcher. It's all gonna go to this agent. That result is going to come here. And now if country contains US, then go to the US. If country does not contain US, then it will go to the international verification. Awesome, that worked great. Let's get rid of these tools. And this one is for US verifications, so let's come here. And now we're just going to do a lob US verification. Now we're just going to go ahead and match these fields. I need to add secondary line, city, state, zip code. And for US, I believe that's all we need. So let's go ahead and execute that step and see if it works. Awesome, deliverable. We've got everything that we need. That's a win. Now let's see if we can do the same thing for international. I know they're called different things. We've got primary line, secondary line, recipient we probably need. Actually, we don't need recipient to validate it. They call it a postal code for international, and we need country. So instead of zip code, it's postal code, and we also need to add country. Let's change this to expression, open that up. Or if it's not showing it on the left here, that's because the previous step doesn't have data. But you can still access it. Let's go into schema, and now you can drop down and find all the previous results. Now, unfortunately, to test this, we would need an international address to actually have this work the way that I need it to work. So we're gonna leave this blank for now and ignore that, and then we're gonna test that later on. Now that went down two different paths. I need to know if it's deliverable or not. That's really my main factor here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin that data, and what I'm gonna do is do a set node. Since we're kind of merging these two different paths, back onto one path. Now remember, we're only going to continue if it is in fact deliverable. So let's go ahead and run that next one. And we're only going to continue if this contains this, if deliverable. It's actually a relatively advanced workflow for just getting started, so I do apologize about that. So if deliverable, continue. Now we want to go ahead and send that card. Now, my guess is there is no native integration for handwritten. Actually, now instead of doing an API call to handwritten, let's use this as a learning experience. So instead of trying to figure out that API call, since we already did that, let me show you another tactic that becomes really, really helpful. And that's going to be using Zapier's native integrations to save yourself frustration and to interact with apps that don't have very good APIs. But as you'll see, there is no webhook action. I can't send webhook. Webhook is only trigger. So what I want to do is do an HTTP request, another API call, but this time we're calling Zapier. So what I'm going to do is actually build another Zap from scratch. So I'm going to do create, new Zap, and I'm going to trigger this one with a webhook, and it's going to catch hook. I'm going to keep hitting continue, and then Zapier is going to give me a webhook URL. I'm going to go ahead and copy that URL and bring that into my N8N. I'm going to post information to that Zapier URL. I don't need to authenticate or do anything. And then I need to send some parameters Zapier's way. So I can do it a couple ways. I can do it right here in the URL. I like to do it as send body and then using these specified forms. So let's go ahead and run this one. I want to get the data all the way here. What do I need to send to Zapier so that I can send that card in handwritten? Let's see what it's asking for. The address, the sender name, and the message. That's essentially it. So let's go ahead and send all that information over. We're going to do first name. I'm going to grab it all from that original webhook. Last name, I'm going to set up the fields first. Let's do their email. Let's do their phone. The more info I send over, the better. That way I won't be missing it. Primary line. All right, so I've set up all my fields. Now it's time to map them. I've got last name. So we're just going to do these one at a time. Now for the address, I want to use my address validator. So we're going to use primary line, secondary line, city, state, country, postal code, and card note. So now it should all be mapped. I'm going to say send to Zapier. And before I execute that step, actually, I'm going to go ahead and execute it because Zapier I can pull from past things. Doesn't like the pin data, so let's go ahead and unpin the data and run the whole thing again. And Zapier is configured. It's ready to catch some data. So I'm going to say N8N, send card, handwritten course intake. That'll help me remember what it is. All right, looks like it went all the way through successfully. Let's come back into Zapier and test. And just like that, we've caught all of that data inside of Zapier. This is a really helpful tactic if you ever get frustrated making API calls, you can't figure it out. Or maybe you need to interact with a platform that doesn't have very good API, and they do have a native Zapier integration. This is going to be really, really helpful. Now let's come into handwritten. We're going to send card, and then we're just going to go ahead and map all of this. All right, and just like that, we've moved that step into Zapier to finish off the automation. Now the last thing that I need to do is send that request to Sendle. And this actually creates a mailing label for this person for a package that I already set up inside of the Sendle application. So this will be a pretty easy one to move over. But the other thing I could do, if I wanted to make my life a little bit easier, and I can copy that webhook from the other Zap just into this one. And then the final step to get this one live, since this is all done, we're finishing the steps in Zapier. Let's undeactivate this one. Let's go ahead and save. We're going to make it active, which is going to make that webhook URL start triggering the live URL. And the good news for us is we already put the live one here. Let's just delete the old one here so it's not triggering for no reason. And then let's come back into that automation. And now we just want to do a couple additional things. We're going to come into settings. We're going to make sure that our error workflow is attached. We want our error logs. And we want to set the time zone to whatever the current time zone is. Especially since we're documenting stuff in Google Sheets and stuff, we want to make sure it's documenting the correct time. Okay, so now we've got a fully formed workflow. And there's a chance that it's going to go along this path and fail. And we'll have to come in and readjust the international. There's a chance that that Zapier step fails. But that's why we have that error logs, and then we can come in and troubleshoot. But this is a fully working automation, and I think is going to function just beautifully. And now I can go ahead and turn this Zapier automation off. That's probably costing me a fortune, and it's not efficient. Moved to N8N. And I always like to say move to N8N and potentially even put them in a folder if they're moved to N8N. Okay, that one was a little bit more complicated than I anticipated, but that's a good thing. You're doing this with me. If I built something I had already built in the past, I could just run through it and you wouldn't see all the ugly bits. That's where you really get the good learning. So now we're going to walk through a much more complex build, which is going to be scraping LinkedIn for a specific target account's comments. We're going to loop through those accounts, database them, qualify them, find their emails, write AI outreach, add them to a LinkedIn campaign, and then add them into a cold email campaign. I might skip some of this final steps because it's not really going to be learning N8N. It's going to be more about what I teach in my lead gen course. But let's go ahead and build this first part so you can learn and implement all of the skills that you just learned. Scraping, looping, AI agents, complex flows. This one's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and start building. All right, now we're really going to have some fun. Let's build this automation that I'm actually going to use for my business. This is going to be a LinkedIn social trigger, and we're going to scrape LinkedIn comments from a set of target accounts. We're going to loop through them, and then we're going to see if those accounts are actually a good fit for me to reach out to try and close a deal, get leads. We're going to then find their email address and then write personalized outreach to them at scale. That's going to happen every day on autopilot. It is a really good lead generation and sales flow. And I've been meaning to build this inside of N8N, so today we're going to build it for my first time. So you're going to get to see all of the nasty bits and kind of learn not just how to implement all those skills that I just showed you, but how to adapt when things go wrong and how to think about building these automations. So let's talk about step one. Trigger daily and scrape LinkedIn comments with Apify. Now, if you listened and paid attention, you would know that in Apify, there's basically two ways to trigger one of these scrapers. I can do it using a saved task on a schedule, Or I can do it here with a schedule trigger. Schedule, start Appify actor, wait, get results. But I'm actually going to start it in Appify. Now, the reason that I'm going to do it in Appify is because I'm probably going to be scraping the same accounts every day. I'm not going to be changing the parameters of the scraper on a daily basis. So it's safer and more sustainable just to do it inside of Appify. Now, the first thing that I need to do is find the scraper that I'm going to use. So let's come to this Appify store, and I'm going to cheat, just like you should probably cheat. And I'm going to say, find me the best Appify actor to scrape LinkedIn comments from a set list of target profiles. Take into account ratings and pricing. And then Perplexity is actually going to go through all of those actors itself, compare the price, look at the ratings and reviews. And this I've found to be the best way to find the right actor to use. LinkedIn comment scraper, pricing not explicitly stated, pay per usage. This one's $5 per 1,000 results. I don't like these $20 per month ones. I like to try and avoid those. $30 per month. All right, let's check out this one first. LinkedIn comment scraper by Capable Cauldron. So let's search for the actor. All right, Capable Cauldron is the creator. So Capable Cauldron, LinkedIn comment scraper. There's 21 people using it. No reviews yet, so it's hard to tell if this one's going to work. Pay per event, this one is $1 per 1,000. So this is probably going to be the most cost effective if it works the way that I hope it works. And it looks like we can scrape posts of specific users, which is what we want. Max comments per post to scrape. Performance settings, proxy and browser configuration. So it doesn't look like we need to log in from our account. We can look up some specific information. All right, looks like we do need our LinkedIn cookies. I think this is for all LinkedIn scrapers. It actually needs to do it from our LinkedIn account. All right, so let's go ahead and test this one and see if it works. Now, I guess before I start scraping LinkedIn comments, I need to know what accounts I'm going to be targeting. I think I still have a Trigify account, so let's see if I do. And if so, I will use that as a tool to try and find the top leaders on LinkedIn for the topics that I'm posting. I also think I have an account at Scripe. Scripe's actually cool because it helps me find formatting styles I like too, but I mostly was using it for research. I haven't used it in a while. And then Trigify, I think I'm still paying for this, is good for social signals. So if you want to do what I'm about to do and skip all of the Appify scraping processes, you can do it in Trigify. But what I found is that the data is not very consistent. But what I can do here is search for influencers. So find the top people in my field using Trigify. So I want to find AI automation. I want to find N8N, B2B leads, lead generation, demand generation. I want keyword strength up a little bit. Let's go over the last 30 days and then followers. Let's get the big boys because I want lots of comments on their posts. All right, so now I've got 77 influencers here. Now let's see. I could exclude. I see a bunch of India in here. I don't really want to target Indian influencers. So let's get India out of there. Portugal, Malaysia, Nigeria. Okay, this could be a good list for us to start with. Let's also do cold email. And to be honest, I should probably do these as two different lists, but for the purposes of this video, let's just go ahead and pick some of these. So Richard Chen, I can click this to actually go to his profile. Let's make sure that he's actually getting comments on his post though, because if he's not, it's not really going to be helpful for us. So I want to see at least 10 to 20 comments per post, and I do not see that out of Richard Chen. Track average engagement. I want high average engagement. I'm going to increase this to 500 just so I get a full list. Now let's find some of these people that are actually getting lots of comments. All right, comments, 939 comments. Great one. So we're just going to copy that profile and I'm just going to bulk edit here. Actually, you know what? In fact, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put them into a separate list just in case I decide to switch actors, use something else. I want to actually save these. Sabrina Ramanoff is great for AI automation. Google Tag Manager Expert. Don't know if that's a good fit for me. All right, let's just start with these so we can get this automation going. All right, so I want to bulk edit. We're going to add all of the profiles we're going to be scraping here. So let's go ahead and set max comments per post. I don't want to set a max. I want all of them. All right, so under performance settings, I think this is where it wants my LinkedIn cookies. So I think I already have the plugin installed, export cookies. So let's come into my LinkedIn account where I'm already signed in. And let's come into export cookies in JSON. If you don't already have that installed, this is where you would go to the Appify information section for this module, and it'll give you the Chrome application that you need to install. Okay, so let's come back here and let's do my LinkedIn cookies. Here are my cookies. So let's just copy and paste all of these. Okay, I love this. I have the option to filter out author comments. I don't want the author comments. Let's see what other options I have. I want to use a residential proxy. That's like an IP address coming from a house. Let's see, advanced settings, max retry, max delay. I'm gonna leave all of that. Pricing and cost per control. Might be good to have this just in case they have like tens of thousands. Maybe I want max data set 5,000. This is also to protect my automation from like data overload. What I don't love about this one is I really want to only find their like recent posts from like today. I don't want all of their posts. So I wonder if there's either a link I can go to. Yeah, and the thing I don't like about this is I can maximize the number of comments per post, but I can't even choose how many posts I want. I don't think this actor is going to work because every time it runs, it's just going to get all of their posts, which is really not what I want. Okay, back to the store, LinkedIn comment. Let's see what some of the main options are here. This one's a rental, 25 per month. LinkedIn profile comments, no cookies. So not coming from my LinkedIn account. That's interesting. Great reviews, $5 per 1,000 results. I might be using this one. Page number. So I'm able to only scrape from a certain page number. That's great. Okay, so this one could be a contender. This one wants to scrape specific posts. So this is not what I want. I want a profile scraper. This one's interesting because I can scrape the feed from a certain day and it's really cheap. So I wonder if I can make this one work. Yeah, this one wants the specific post URL. I want to start with the profile. Now what I might need to do here, and it might actually be a better idea, is a two-step scrape. So instead of just giving it a profile and getting all the recent posts and the comments on those posts, what I might want to do is first scrape the profiles and get the recent post URLs, and then run an additional scraper on each of those posts to get information on those posts. And I think that might be a better way to approach it since it doesn't look like any of these scrapers are going to do what I want, probably for that reason. It wants the specific post URL to get the comments, and you can't get the post URL without scraping the profile. So I think we need to run two. All right, so I like this one from what I'm seeing for scraping specific posts. It's really cheap. This one will find the comments without my cookies. Now I need one that actually scrapes the profiles. So LinkedIn post scraper. Nice, I already have this one rented. I think I am using this one to write comments for those posts. So I'm gonna use this one again for this use case. Now I think I have a task created with this one. So I'm gonna actually create another task. It's already got my cookies and I think it's running well. So we're gonna use this one. And it does suggest that recent activity /all. So let's go ahead and do that bulk edit. Grab our list. I'm just gonna make sure they're formatted correctly here. Okay, limit per source. So how many posts per source do I wanna scrape? It's gonna be happening every day. And my guess is none of them are probably posting more than like 3 per day. Now I just got a really good idea. I think this one's happening in make.com. It's an old automation that I built to actually find posts and write comments for those LinkedIn posts. I could actually piggyback off that automation. So instead of running this again every time I want to leave comments, I'm already running it. I could just piggyback off of that one in make.com and send all of those new post URLs into N8N to initiate this workflow. I'm going to do this from scratch since you probably don't have one set up and I want to practice your skills. So we got source URLs. I already showed you how to do the cookies. We're going to put in those source URLs. And I'm actually curious what my other task had for saved URLs. They've probably already done this research before. All right, get more information such as likes, comments, yes. I'm gonna leave these minimum wait durations as is. It's gonna scrape 3 of these posts. Let's go ahead and save and start and see if this works. I always like to test it in Apify before ever bringing it inside of N8N. All right, so on that log, I can see this scraper actually working. It looks like it's working successfully. It's outputting specific posts here. And now I'm gonna be able to use these post URLs to get the comments. Awesome, here's those post URLs. That's the magic, that's what I want. All right, so that did work successfully. I got the last 3 posts from each of these authors. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off. First thing I'm gonna wanna do is create a task with this actor. So let's go ahead and come back to the actor. All this saved information here, I'm going to create a task. LinkedIn post scrape, get comments. And then we're going to copy from the input tab. So now that we've got a saved task, I can just run this task, monitor this task, and it's already got all this saved information in it. And just as I suspected, I've got this other post scraper here. Here it is, the LGJ commenter. So this one is also running daily. And then here's the new one that I just set up. Now what I want to do is put it on a schedule. So I've already got a daily schedule. Any of these enabled. LinkedIn comments daily. So if you're starting from scratch, you'll just create new. I want to do this daily. pick a time that works for you, save and enable, and then you want to add your task, get comments. I'm probably going to disable this one when I'm done testing it and then combine it with the other one. But for now, we've got this already set up. Now it's going to happen on a daily basis. Now the next thing that I want to do is come to those tasks. Let's find that save task, get comments, and I want to come to integrations. There's actually two ways that I can trigger my automation. So let's come into my automation first. I need to trigger this when that task is finished running. Now it's going to run every day, and then I can get notified one of two ways. Luckily, they now have a native Appify integration where I can just come on Appify event. You're going to obviously sync your Appify account, resource to watch, task from list. This is going to be like the get comments. Awesome. Event type succeeded. So let's go ahead and execute that step. And now it's going to wait for that task to finish. So let's go ahead and run it. Now I could have ran it directly from the schedule, but as long as this task runs and succeeds, it should trigger that first trigger in my automation. Now, while that's finishing up, let's find my second Appify actor that I'm going to need to run. It's not going to be that one, to actually get the comments from the post. And maybe it's this one, get comments URL. This is the one that I originally started with, but again, my thought process was wrong. I needed to first scrape the profiles to get the post URLs, and then I could get the comments. And this one does look really cheap. So let's just go ahead and scrape a post and see if it works. Oh, but this one just finished. So let's go ahead and pin this data. Let's see what we got. We got this output data that the task is done. Obviously, there's no URLs or data in here. We have to go get it. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. And then we're going to have to get that data set from the Appify actor. So Appify, we're going to get data set items. And then we're going to find that data set ID, default data set ID. Do I want to limit? Yeah, maybe I limit it to like 100. And then I'm going to say get posts. And because it's done, that data set ID is ready. It's already succeeded. All I need to do to actually get the data from here is run it. And now I've got those 9 items. And this is what we want. These are the posts that we're going to be essentially getting the comments from. So let's grab one of these URLs and let's test some different post scrapers. So this is essentially the data that I'm going to be feeding into it. Actually, you know what? I don't want to use this one because it uses my cookies. This one's a little bit more expensive, but it's probably going to be slightly safer for my LinkedIn account. So let's go ahead and try this one instead. It's also got lots of reviews, so I trust it. Maximum number of comments to scrape. Let's leave this off. I don't want a maximum. Ooh, posted limit filter. So this is great. Only like recent comments in the last week. I really want recency here, so let's go ahead and do that. And let's see if this works. My one reason why I think it could not work is the post URL didn't look like what I expected it to. Scrape comment. It says done. Okay, now the results are coming. Let's go to that post and see if that's accurate. Cool, 7 comments. It got all 7 comments. And it did it without my cookies. And this cost pennies. 7 comments divided by $2, almost nothing. So cool, we found a scraper. Let's go ahead. I'm going to save it. Hit that little save button because I like reusing my scrapers. And then in this case, we're not going to put this one on a schedule because every time we run this, we're going to be doing it with a different post URL. So for that reason, we need to trigger it from inside of N8N. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into JSON. This is what I'm going to need to put inside of N8N. Now let's go inside of my workflow here. Now that we've got all these posts, the next thing we're going to have to do is loop through these posts. I can't send all 9 of these data items through at the same time. But what I could potentially do is filter them out first. Maybe I want to filter out comments from the user who posted it, which is something I can probably do. So let's see what I'm working with. We've got attributes. The company is common room. I've got the author. The author is probably what I want here. So let's open this back up. It looks like the author is someone named Aaron Reeves. This is one of the guys that I'm going to be monitoring. So let's maybe filter out any comments by Aaron. I don't know if he left any, but that would make a lot of sense to filter out any comments or replies by the actual person who posted it. So what I want to do here is create a filter. All right, we've hit a roadblock. So let's figure out how to get around it. We're sending multiple arrays of data. We're sending posts. I have 9 posts, and each of these 9 posts has comments. Like one of these posts has 7 comments. So you've got 9 posts with varying range of comments, which means you need to do potentially 2 loops. All right, so let's get started. Let's start looping this 9 posts. So we're going to create a loop where it's just going to run one at a time. It's going to add this stuff automatically. We're just going to delete it. And then we want to go on that loop node. So loop, it's going to run one at a time. And the first thing we want to do is probably check the database to see if we've already seen this post before. Now we're going to use Supabase just because high API limits, it's free, it's easy to use. And I'm really just using it to see if I've seen this post before. I'm going to do get many rows, and now I actually need to go to Supabase and make a table for this. So let's come into table editor. We're going to do a new table, LinkedIn posts, get commenters. And then we will add some fields down here. What I care about is the post URL. And let's see what other data that I actually have that I'm going to be using to filter with. Post URL, share URN, I don't know. This posted at timestamp, that could be a good one to use if the URL is inconsistent. So I might use that too. Let's do post content. The URL is going to be, of course, a URL. And we're setting the type. I like to just use text string. Post content, text string, posted timestamp. And that timestamp is going to be numeric. Okay, that's all I really care about. I just want to see if we've encountered that post before. I'm not really ever going to be checking this. So now that we've got the table set up, let's go back into the workflow, and we're going to try and get posts. And we're going to try and check that Supabase database to see if we've encountered it before. Let's go ahead and run that loop just so we can keep testing here. Table name, we select the table name we just made. I really only want to return one if it finds it. Must match any filter. So we're looking for post URL. Don't like how it's got all that ugliness at the back of it. I wonder if there's a cleaner version. Let's see. Oh, I think that's it. Now you can grab that post URL from the loop, or you could grab it from this step here. Oop, and I think I put it in the wrong spot. So post URL equals, and then we can add another filter, posted timestamp equals, and then we're going to grab that timestamp. Posted at timestamp. Okay, we're going to find row, and in this case, it's not going to find anything, but that's actually a bad thing because we want to give it some test data to actually find something with. So let's do the post URL, and we're also going to grab the timestamp that it's looking for, and we're just going to give it some test data here. Now let's run it, and it should find something. Awesome. There it is. It found what I expected it to, so we can go ahead and keep going. Because now if it finds it, if post URL does not exist, meaning we haven't encountered it before, it will continue. So if new, continue. And if it's false because it does exist, we're just going to bring it back to the loop. Everything needs to connect back to the loop. All right, so now it's new, awesome. Let's go ahead and database it in Supabase. So we're going to go back to Supabase, and we're going to add a row. Post URL, post content, post timestamp. And then for these, we're just going to come into expression and grab it from the step back. URL, content, not that I'll ever need that, I might. We're just going to throw it in there just because, and then timestamp. Okay, and that's databasing, because if it ever encounters that row again, it's just going to go false and skip it. All right, let's run this whole thing and get some new test data. So it's going to run it, got to connect that, and let's run it again. All right, now I really want it to go on that true path, so let's go ahead and delete that row, and let's run it again. It did not find anything. All right, and I made a classic mistake that now you're going to learn from. So under find row here, if it doesn't find anything, right now it's not outputting any data at all. So you always want to flip this to always output data. That way, even if it doesn't find anything, this continues. So we're going to go ahead and run it, and now it's going to not find anything, and then create the row, and now we're caught up. All right, so now we've got this post with all of these comments, and we need to break up those comments into an array. So what we're going to do is come into data transformation, and we're going to split out. And we're going to come into loop over items because that's the individual things that we're looping over. And what we want to do here, as you can see, we've got comments, and then we've got all the comments nested in here. So what we need to split out is these comments. We need to split it out from an array, and it's actually expecting it from the result right before. So what we actually need to do now is add another step to get those posts. And now we're going to be using the dataset ID from before. So you can see I'm problem solving in real time. I've never done this before. Half the time you get stuck and you have to like stop and try and find the solution to something. This is a unique one because we got two arrays, an array of posts and an array of comments all in the same workflow. So hopefully I am able to problem solve this live with you guys. Okay, so we've gotten the posts again, and now we should be able to take the comments array and split it out. Awesome. So we've split it out, and now we've got 70 comments. But this is no good either, because we just spent all this time earlier filtering out posts that we've already seen before. And here we're just grabbing those posts again. So we basically skipping over that databasing step, which we also don't want. So a couple things I could do is I can split out the comments up here, and then I can database the comments and not the posts, which is what I'm going to do. And this is actually great because I thought we were going to have to run another task here, to get the comments from a post, but we don't. Our main actor gets the posts and it gets the comments. So let's go ahead and do this step earlier on. We're going to get rid of this. We're going to kill that. And we are going to split out here, which means we're probably going to have to change our database as well. By the way, you can select multiple and just move them around. That makes working a lot easier. So let's go ahead and split these out. It's expecting the same result. It's going to give us the exact same result. And then we're going to loop over 70 comments instead of over 9 posts. But obviously this changes the structure of our automation a bit. So let's go ahead and run this again. And now we're going to loop over those 70 comments. So now let's go into our database and we're going to add a comment URL. We're going to add it as a string, text string, and let's add a comment author. Let's go ahead and delete all of these just so we can kind of start from scratch here. So now I don't care as much about the post URL because people could comment more recently. What I care about is the comment URL or the comment author. Mostly the comment author. I don't want to hit the same comment author over and over again. So let's go ahead and say comment author equals, and then we're looping over items. Each item of these is a comment. By the way, if you try and search in JSON, it doesn't quite work. So sometimes you need to go into table or schema. So comment author equals first name, last name. We just have to remember the exact search term that we used because when we're adding to the database, if it's not found, then we need to add the comment author as that. All right, let's go ahead and proceed. We're going to find row. It did not find it, so it continued. And then we're going to create row. Now a little snag here. Author first name, last name did not work because we were referencing a different node. And the one thing I noticed is I was getting too much data here, way more than I actually want. So the other thing I want to split up other than comments is probably reactions. So we've got comments, a bunch of comments, and then reactions is the other. So instead of doing all other fields, I just did other fields, reactions. And that should be all I want there. Let's go ahead and execute it again and see if that helps limit the amount of data that I'm getting. Yes, it does. Perfect. All right, let's run this thing again. All right, so here we go. Comment author, first name, last name. Now I could decide to do reactions as well at a later date. That would definitely increase the number of people that I'm getting. But for now, this should be good. However, we need to adjust these variables as well. So loop over items, we're just going to send the comment author. So we're just finding by the comment author and creating the comment author. All right, so now we are at check for duplicates in Supabase. Now we need to qualify them, see if these people are actually going to be a good fit for us to reach out to and try and turn into a lead. So let's see what information that we have about these people. We've got his public ID, profile ID, occupation. I would love to get some more information from his LinkedIn account, like his bio and all of that good stuff. So let's see if there's anything I can do here. So I know on Clay, the Clayagent can actually go visit it. Cool, this one actually gets their LinkedIn profile details and email with no cookies required, and it's 5 for 1,000. That's not bad. Let's see what else we've got here. This one's 10 for 1,000, 10 for 1,000, bad ratings, bad ratings. All right, let's go ahead and run this one for now. Now, if this gets their email, then the 5 for 1,000 is well worth it. So first, let's run this thing. We're going to search for email, and let's use the profile username. So let's grab an example from here. All right, seems to be going well. Seems to be processing. Successfully processed 1. That's good news. Now, it says done, but I don't have any output. There we go. Let's see what we got. Oh, that's beautiful. Look at all that information. Let's see if we have an email address. Email address would be awesome. If we switch this to JSON, it makes it a little bit easier to go through. Experience, education, languages, profile URL. I don't see email. A lot of these profiles don't have an email publicly available. So I'm going to show you how to get it in the next step. So, okay, this works well. It's super cheap. That cost me 0.005 cents. So let's come in here, and we're going to be using this one. So we've got the JSON. Cool. And what I want to do, since this is quick and we're going to be doing a lot of these, is let's come into API, and we're going to go to API endpoints. We're going to run actor synchronously and get dataset items. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that endpoint. And as you can see, it's a post endpoint. So let's come back into our workflow. And we're going to do these one at a time. So HTTP request, we're going to do post. We're going to drop that URL. We're going to come back and grab this JSON. And we're going to send body using JSON, just like that. And then we're going to put the username in there from our variables. So let's come into expression. It needs to be an expression so that we can add variables. Fix just means just text. You can't add anything. and then we're going to loop over items and grab the public ID. And now it's going to scrape these LinkedIn profiles in bulk one at a time. So scrape LinkedIn profile. When I copy this Appify URL, it already has my API key attached to it. So there's nothing else that I have to do there. It's a really easy workflow to use. I'm going to go ahead and disable the create row so I can keep running this and testing this. So let's go ahead and run it again. And now I want to scrape LinkedIn profile and see what kind of test data I get here. All right, that took about 5 seconds. That's great. This is going to work really, really well. And from here, I got enough information to do a lot of things. I can qualify him. I can say, okay, is this going to be a good lead for me to reach out to? And then I can also write personalized messages to him for email, for LinkedIn outreach. There's a lot of great stuff I've got here. I've got his whole bio. I've got his company. I've got his educational history. And I can feed all of this now into an AI agent to see, 1, is he qualified? And 2, actually start writing that messaging to him. But what I want to do is see if I can find one where the email is present. Because if the email is present, then I don't have to do a find email step. But that's okay. For now, we're just going to do the find email step, and then we can add that later on. All right, so now that we've got his LinkedIn profile information, the other piece of information that we're going to need in order to send him cold emails and do a outreach campaign to him is see if we can find his email address. So in this next step, I actually want to do an email identification step. So I like using ICPs for finding emails. This is a great tool to give just a name, a last name, a domain, and it's going to go ahead and find that person for me. So before I do an API call, let's actually just go into the platform first and see if it can find them based on this information. So I've got first name, I've got last name, and then I've got his company. Now, however, I don't have his company URL. So I'm actually going to save that step for after I write the messaging to him. Okay, so now that I've scraped his profile, I've got all the info that I need to decide if this is going to be a good lead for me to reach out to or not. So I want to do an AI agent step, and this is going to be a qualifying step. So what I want to do here is I'm going to come into AI, and I'm typically just using AI agent for anything that's related to an AI step. So I'm going to do define below, and for the user prompt, I'm going to change that to expression so I can add variables. I'm going to do his full name, his location. I need his bio. I'm going to do his headline as well, just with his bio. I'm going to do current company under company. I've got his job title right here, and I've got his company description as well. So basically I can feed it all of this and really just ask it, you are a helpful, I'm going to say sales assistant. Your goal is to qualify this lead for an AI automation B2B lead gen offer. Is this person a qualified lead that may need these services and be able to afford them? Output true or false only. And just to make sure we're only getting true or false, output parser, structured output parser. Now this one is going to be Boolean. So all I want, I'm going to delete this. I don't need that comma after, and I don't need these quotation marks. This is telling it that I want it in Boolean format, and I'll just always add an auto fixer. And let's power this thing by ChatGPT. So we're going to use OpenAI, and this is a really easy one. I don't think it's going to need to think or do anything crazy, so I'm just going to use GPT-5 Nano, which is just really cheap, and it's going to be able to go through lots and lots of data here. Okay, so let's go ahead and pin this guy and run it and see what it comes out with. Don't think it likes the pinned data. Let's try it again. All right, one more shot. Scraping LinkedIn profile. All right, qualifying agent is running. Let's see if it outputs what I want. True, it is a good prospect, and I agree. I think it is as well. I probably want to get a little bit more specific with the system message so it knows exactly what I'm looking for. You know, must be a decision maker, must be in a B2B industry. But this is giving me some really good information. So now that I know if they're qualified or not, we're going to add another if step. Whenever you're running loops, you do not want to use filters because it always needs to come back to the loop, and a filter will stop something dead in its tracks, stop a record dead in its tracks. So you want to use an if or a switch. So if qualified, Boolean, is true, then continue. So if they're not qualified, we're just going to bring it all the way back to the loop. And if they are qualified, I think my next step is going to be research agent. So qualified, this is done. Email finder, I think I'm going to move this towards the end because this is mostly going to be used for LinkedIn outreach anyways. And I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to find at least most of the emails. But I think I want a research agent that might also double as a email finding agent. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another AI agent. And this is going to be my research agent. Now, the reason I want to add a research agent is because I like to split up the steps, and I want to do research into the person and into the company to see if they're doing anything recently, anything notable. So what I'm going to do here now, let's go ahead and process this one. So let's feed it a lot of the same stuff. So I should be able to just copy this prompt into here and preserve a lot of the same stuff. JSON experience company. Okay, apparently not. Let's see. All right, have to redo it with fields from a different step. We're gonna use the scrape LinkedIn profile step and grab the name. Just kind of redo all of this. Okay, so we've got bio, we've got location, job title, company description. We've also got his headline here. Now for the system message, you are a sales research assistant for a B2B lead gen and AI automation company. Your goal is to do research on this prospect and find information for the sales team personalized. Use your Perplexity tool to research the business and the prospect and find recent news, events, social media posts, etc. that can be used to craft personalized cold outreach messages. And then I want to see if I can find a way for it to try and find the email too. So let's see if I can give it specific tools. So I can give it access to ICPs, potentially Apollo. Let's try and give it access to ICPs. We're going to power this thing also by ChatGPT. We'll just go ahead and use 5 for this one. So one tool that I already said I was going to give it is Perplexity. This one's going to be used to do internet research on the prospect. And I'm just going to let AI determine what it uses to search Perplexity. And I do want to simplify the output. And remember to call it exactly what you call it with the AI agent. So I called it Perplexity, so it's Perplexity. Now I also want to give it access to some email research tools. So let's see if I can give it access to ICPs. I'm going to try and find this person's email just from the platform itself before I do an API call. This guy's email is actually public. It should have gotten pulled with that email scrape. Wonder if I just missed it. Let's see. Yeah, not sure why it didn't pull it, but it should have, and it's going to be really easy to find his email now. So domain and company, let's see what his company is. So saasfluence.co, let's go ahead and find that website. All right, beautiful. We've got name, website, and we do have a verified email. So this is going to work. Let's go ahead and add this step in. So first we're going to need to access their API documentation, and we're going to do the single search email discovery. It's a post call to this URL. And here is what it's looking for. Now, what I'm not seeing in this API documentation is where to send them my API key. I don't see it anywhere here. So let's go ahead and ask. I'm going to come into my handy dandy assistant. How do I send my API key when doing this post call? Let's see what it says there. In the meantime, let's go ahead and start setting it up. Okay, it's a header auth. Well, hopefully this is right, but it looks like it is a header authentication. Oh, here we go. Authorization header containing your API key only. Okay, awesome. That is actually really helpful. So we're going to do a API call. I'm going to set up an authentication because I'll probably be using this a lot more. I'm going to do generic credential type. I'm going to do header authentication. And then I'm going to do create new credential. And I'm going to call this one ICPs. You should, by the way, do this for all of the software applications that you use. So it makes things a lot easier. So authorization is the first parameter that it wants. And then the value is going to be my API key. All right, I'm going to call this one ICPs find email. This is going to be a post call. This is the URL that I want to send the call to. So post, boom, we've got the header auth already set up. And then we're going to send JSON in the body. And this is what it wants. So now let's change this to expression. All right, I changed my mind. I want to do that in a separate step. This is just going to be the research step. It's going to use Perplexity. And then for the output, finally output the research in plain text only, the company URL, output the following. All right, now let's see if it'll let me run this thing and test the research agent. Now you can either separate them. I like to separate them. You get a slightly better result when you have an AI just focused on a singular task. But I could very well also turn this into my copywriting agent. So let's just go ahead and do that for simplicity's sake. Research and copywriting. And then let's go ahead and modify this prompt. Sales research assistant, write a personalized LinkedIn message asking if the prospect needs any help with AI automation in their business and reference a specific use case from your research. Write a personalized cold email as well. Research in plain text only, the company URL, the LinkedIn message in plain text, the cold email in plain text. Now, obviously, you can do a whole series of emails here. You can do a LinkedIn message. You could even do a voicemail and then add a step for like 11 labs in here to actually generate a unique voicemail for that prospect. Now, what I'm noticing here is this thing is doing way too much research, which I guess can be a good thing, but I may actually want to limit how much it's doing. So let's go ahead and stop this right here since I edited the prompt anyway. And let's give it some properties. This thing goes going kind of crazy. Just do like a max number of tokens, max iterations 3. Hopefully this makes it a little bit more fine-tuned. And then I actually want to add a structured output parser since we're getting a lot of different variables here. So let's say create structured output JSON for this. Cool. And now we're going to go ahead and add that output parser. Require output format. Yes. And I think that looks good. Cool. Let's go ahead and run it again and see what kind of result we get. And while that's running, I can work on that next HTTP request to ICPs. We already set up the header authentication for ICPs. ICP's email finder. All right, this thing's working. I gave it max iterations of 3, so hopefully it's able to get everything it needs in that time. Better get some bomb research too. Okay, let's see what it came out with. Agent stopped due to max iterations. Why is it taking so long is my question. So let's go to logs, message model in perplexity, output. It found a bunch of stuff. So let's add some more limitations here. Limit your research to 6 sentences with only the most important information. Try not to exceed 3 searches. Okay, and it does not like that I tried to limit the number of iterations. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. I'm also going to change the GPT model to make it a little bit more concise. Let's try the GPT 5 mini. Try the 5 nano, see if that helps. All right, let's run it again. All right, finally, we got what we wanted. We've got a LinkedIn message, a cold email, the company URL, and the research. Let's go ahead and pin this. It's exactly what we want. Now, if you're getting annoyed, you have to run this whole thing every time. I wanted you to see that. It is annoying. What you can actually do is break it up into much smaller steps. So when I run this ICP's email finder, I don't have to run the entire thing again. So how do I do that? Let's go ahead and copy this output. And I love doing this for testing once it starts to get really long. I'm going to add another trigger, and I'm going to trigger manually. And then in this manual trigger, I'm going to just copy the output from the last result into this result. So now it's like it's starting from here, but with all of this data. And I can just execute it from here and keep the party going. So for testing purposes, I already know the guy's name. So let's come in and let's configure this thing. Name, and then we can do domain or company. I think it may actually be better just to do the company name. So let's see. Let's go to scrape LinkedIn profile. We want the first name. Oh, I forgot to switch it to expression first, and that's what happens. First name, last name, and then we have the company name here. No, it doesn't like that because this node is pinned. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be correct. Yeah, testing can be annoying. So I think I do have to run this whole thing to get this thing to actually work. I could skip the testing on this one and move on. But sometimes this manual trigger does come in handy, especially when you only need this data. But when you're taking it from throughout, it can be a little bit tricky. So let's go ahead and disconnect this guy, and we'll unpin this data. And what I can do, probably instead of running this guy, and I don't need that data to get it, is just go ahead and deactivate it. I also don't think I need this data. Let's try and pin that filter and run it again. Go ahead and delete all of these rows. Yeah, the testing and building phase can be a little bit frustrating at times. Part of the fun. All right, scraping the LinkedIn profile. I think we're going to be in business. Let's go ahead and just pin that one for next time too. All right, success true. That does not get me his email address though. All I know is that it found it. So it found the email address, and then I need to fetch the results. So let's go ahead and give a little wait step and then run this API call. So it only took a few seconds, so I'm only going to give it a few seconds. So let's come back into that workflow. Let's add a 10-second wait. And I think that's all we're going to need in this case. Jesus, it's running it all again just for that one. Painful. I'm going to come back into executions. I'm going to find the one where it actually went through ICPs. This one here, copy to editor. And now I've got that result pinned. I actually don't need to run that wait step. What I need to do is do another API call to ICPs. That's going to be a post. We're going to do it to that URL. We're going to add our predefined header that we already signed into. And then we're just going to add this JSON. Send body, boom. And remember, this ID is going to change it to expression. It's going to come from this step here. Get verified email ICPs. All right, let's try and run it. And now we don't need this one to run in order to get this. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that. And now here's a good case where this might work. Boom. Manual trigger to that pin data. And now we've got that verified email. And that's good to know. So the email finder, let's come back to the system itself, reset. It did not find it for the company name, but it did find it for the website. So that's great to know. That's why we do it in here as well. So let's go back into the tool and let's reconfigure some stuff. Instead of using the name of the company, now we're going to use the domain. So I need to undeactivate this research agent and I need to use this company URL. All right, now we're running the whole thing again. All right, that was the magic. Now we've got the email and the certainty is ultra sure. So we've got a pretty good email address here. Now the hard part is over. The final step is actually putting them into our campaigns to start sending LinkedIn messages and start sending emails. So I like to database all of this stuff. So whether that be with like Airtable or a Google Sheet, just to get this all into one spot, we can put this into a Google Sheet. So let's go ahead and build a sheet real quick. Do LinkedIn, comment leads, N8N, date, name, email, phone, company, website, bio, research, LinkedIn message, email message. And now at least I'm databasing this stuff, so I'll know that if I reached out to them, I know what I did with them. And I can always reference this material again. I'm gonna replace phone probably with location. I don't think I'm gonna get their phone. I've got company. Okay, so now all of this is mapped into Google Sheets. I really don't need to run that one as a test. I'm pretty sure that one's going to work. So my next step is to get this into Instantly AI and AimFox, which are the tools that I use to send cold emails and to send LinkedIn messages. So these are going to be 2 additional API requests. For the purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. We're just going to end it with adding to a Google Sheet. So let's go ahead and title this thing. Let's give it some tags and let's save it. Now it's all going to go into this Google Sheet. So when I do want to use it, I can just kind of grab the rows and put them into the campaign or just add to the back of this campaign. But I think you've probably had enough of custom API calls for right now. So let's go ahead and call this one LinkedIn Scrape Comments, Custom Cold Outreach. Give it some tags, LinkedIn, lead gen, ICPs. I'm gonna go instantly and it's gonna go to AimFox. These are like all the tools that I'm using, Appify. So I can easily filter by those tools and figure out what's going on. Okay, let's go ahead and make this thing active. We've now got a very complex workflow that's working and ends by adding people into this Google Sheet. So I hope it's helpful going through and kind of seeing my thought process, attacking different challenges as they come and how to kind of work through them mentally, how to approach different situations and use AI agents and use some of this data manipulation to get to a certain result. Because sometimes it does get tricky, but if you understand all the tools at your disposal and what to do to overcome certain challenges, then there's almost nothing that you can't build. And I hope this is a good example of that. Now, the next step for you is to actually start building. That's how you're gonna get better. It might seem easy as you see me going through it, but I promise you, as you start to build your own automations and agents, you're gonna hit roadblocks and you're gonna need a community to help you get better. So one thing you can do is join the AI Automation Insiders on School. It's 100% free. And as you get stuck, you can just post it in the community and me and our community will come and help you get unstuck. If you have a use case that you're trying to accomplish, put it in there and we will show you how to do it. But most importantly, you'll get access to our software vault where you can save a ton of money on automation software like Appify and Make.com. And we will also set up your self-hosted N8N for you. Now, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. I'm gonna be showing step-by-step walkthroughs on how I build a lot of my automations and giving you templates to start importing some of the really cool stuff that we're doing in our company into your company. It's 100% free to support me, and please leave a comment. Let me know if you got value out of this video. It means a lot. This video took a long time, a lot of energy and money to put together, so your feedback and engagement means the world to me. Go join the AI Automation Insiders where you can import our templates, see our walkthroughs, make sure that you get in there before it gets locked down. Thank you again, and I will see you soon.